But the first thing we're going to have happen, according to the agenda, is to pass the agenda. And the new legislation requires a roll call vote for every vote that's taken. So we'll need to call on everyone individually and take their vote.
Okay, very good. So then anybody? Okay, Mr. Moser is checking volume, and we had turned it down out here, but now it's coming up. I think we're okay. Very good. Okay. Very good. So council members, I'll call your attention to a couple of changes on the agenda. Let me mute us out here again. There we go. It's a great show to watch, isn't it, folks? So here we go. Okay, council members, once again, we have under new business, number 7 on our agenda. If you'll pause for a moment, we've got some feedback here. I'll be right back. Save my place. Okay, life should be grand now. Very good. So under new business, we're going to add, and on your agenda, you may not have new business indicated because I believe it went out with a new business not identified, but you will see resolution 202-0027, and that's our setting a public hearing. Under that, we have 2 new items. We're going to add ordinance 202-0022, and that's an order to collect 2020 taxes by the Forsyth County Tax Collector. And we're then number 3 under that is ordinance 202-0023, and that's an order to collect 2019 and prior year taxes also by the tax collector. Ms. Walker, have there been any additional changes that we should make note of?
No, not since receiving those this afternoon.
Very good. Council members, any additions or changes to the agenda that you wish to make? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Franklin makes a motion. Ms. Hunt makes a second. Roll call. Mr. Smitherman.
Approve.
Very good. Ms. Welch.
Approved.
Ms. Foster.
Yes, approved.
Dr. Sadler.
All right.
Mr. Franklin.
I approve. I'm having trouble with audio, by the way.
Yeah, you are a little shaky there. Ms. Hunt.
Approved.
Very good. That is, and the Mayor Horn also approves the agenda. They're good. That's our agenda for this evening. So we will start out with Stacy. You have a UDO assessment update for us. Do you want to introduce Chad for us, if he is here?
Yes. Hank is getting him up and running to be a panelist so he can share his screen to give a quick presentation to you guys. What this was, if you remember, last year we did a UDO assessment. What that is, it just has taken our UDO, what is on our UDO, what is in it, all the chapters, all the zoning districts, everything. Stewart is the company that Chad works for, and we hired them to do this assessment to tell us what we could make better, what might need to change, what could stay, what could go, all those types of things. And so Chad, I'm going to turn it over to him. I was very pleased with what they were able to do and the feedback they were able to give us. So Chad did go through some meetings with different types of groups, being boards and committees, different people around town, all those different things. Some of the council members participated in that. And so I will turn it over to Chad, and he can give you a quick synopsis of kind of what he has found and some different things that hopefully will be able to come out of this project. So Chad, I'll turn it over to you. Can you hear me? I don't know. Mayor, can you hear me?
I
Yeah,
can,
I can.
Stacy.
Okay. We have Chad's screen, but I don't know where
How about
Chad
now?
is.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hey, there he is.
All
Hey,
right.
Chad.
I have had, I assume you can see the screen, right? Everything's good there?
Yes.
Yes. So I've had about 3 different meetings today, and my technology has failed me every single time. So I'm really hoping that this one works out well and we finish today on a positive note. But thank you for the introduction. It's been really great being and visiting in the town of Louisville and getting to know the community. I wish I could be there tonight, but obviously the circumstances have changed, and we're all either in our offices or in our house. Slide here. Okay, so I've got a couple of things I'm going to go over tonight. I want to give you a little more information about who we are and what we did on this project. Talk about the process, and then how we went through and did a lot of research and analyzing of your existing codes, and then some recommendations that we came out, and then just see if you have any questions there at the end. So as Stacy mentioned, we're with Stewart. We are a company that's based out of Raleigh, but we do have an office in Durham, Charlotte, and Wilmington, and also Columbia, South Carolina. We're about a 26-year-old firm now, and we are about 250 employees across all those areas. So I like to say our CEO, Willie Stewart, started the company and wanted to have 12 employees, and he has far succeeded his initial wish. But a little bit about our group. So I oversee our municipal planning group, and we serve local governments across the state. One of the things that's a little different about our group, and it's a passion of mine, is that we really try to focus on small to mid-sized communities. So if you look at some of our clients that are on the map on the screen, you'll see that most of these communities that we have worked in or are working in are small to mid-sized communities. One of the things that also separates us is that we're a preferred partner with the League of Municipalities. And I know all of you have, are familiar with that group, and we work a lot with them. We just recently did a webinar on some economic forecasting to sort of talk about how local government's going to face things going forward. So, but some of our services, are listed on the screen. One of the things that we do a lot of are developments, ordinance writing, and assessments. And so that's what we've been doing for the town over the last couple of months. And we do comprehensive plans and small area plans, greenway and open space planning, and a lot of other services for local governments. So that's a little bit about our firm. And now I'm going to go into the assessment report. So if you've had a chance to look at it, it actually is broken down into 4 areas. So we have our background, we have the review of your existing planning documents, and then the heart of the report is how we've gone through and really analyze your codes. And then we have some recommendations on where you should go forward. So just a little bit about, what is a UDO? It's permitted under 160A 381, which is soon to change. It'll be 160D, probably the first of the year. But the state gives local governments the authority to, regulate zoning and development, and it's either through separate ordinances or as a unified development ordinance. And so what makes a UDO great? What makes a really good development ordinance? Well, it incorporates your goals from your comprehensive plans. It is a reorganization and integration of all your codes that might be spread out over different ordinances. It has very limited and hopefully none inconsistencies and redundancies. You have very clear development processes, and it's a very user-friendly document. So what we like to think of is if you have a good UDO, these are some of the things that are important to have in those components. So, talking with Stacy and your staff, we know you have an older ordinance. And so like to think of this as being maybe phase one as you move into more of a comprehensive approach to update things. So, you know, we had a project initiation, which I'll talk a little bit about in a little bit, and now we've completed the code assessment report and come up with what we recommend a new UDO or a reorganized UDO should look like. Now, if you notice on the screen, I sort of have a little dotted line, and I know that you know, your comprehensive plan is 5 years old, going on 6 years old, and that is the time to start updating those things. And so, you know, what I'm showing on this chart is that, you know, you need to take that time and really focus where you want to grow. You know, what do you want to do? How do you want to be over the next 10 to 15 years? And then as you get through that process, you're going to come up with new land use goals and strategies and how, you know, some of the things you may have in there now may not be applicable anymore. And so, you know, after you go through that process and you get a new comprehensive plan or an updated comprehensive plan, that's when you go into a full UDO rewrite, because you'll be able to incorporate a lot of those things that may come out and get flushed out during that comprehensive plan update. So as far as some of the plans that we looked at, we did a lot of research. You know, we analyzed your comprehensive plan. Again, I mentioned that already. It was 2015 when that was adopted. Your most recent plan is your Northeast Area Plan. You know, you have a Greenway and Pedestrian Connection Plan, which is getting a little older, but still has some really good information in it and some good guidelines. And then, of course, your Great Wagon Road project in your downtown. And what I thought was really great was your citizen survey. I think that's really great that you do that on a pretty regular basis, and it allows your citizens to constantly give you feedback. So as far as our process and our background, we did interview your staff. Stacy and I talked a lot during this process. We were able to get a great tour of the community. We spent a whole day there going around seeing different development types and documenting things that we found. We had a whole day long series of stakeholder interviews, and some of you that are on this call were actually part of that. And then, as I mentioned before, we reviewed your adopted plans and really analyzed your current UDO. And you know, the plan was to present this to the planning board, and of course now we're doing it for town council. So that's been the process up to now. So as far as your current regulations, you know, you call it a UDO, but it really acts as 4 separate ordinances. You've got a definition ordinance that was initially done in 1967, your zoning ordinance, which was 1967 as well, and your subdivision ordinance was 1995, and then your environmental ordinances has different parts that were done throughout different years. You know, one of the first things we noticed is you've got 450 plus pages, and you know, already, you know, usually we try to keep our UDOs to about 300, 325. So you've got a very thick document already. And, you know, as we've gone through it, you know, it originated as a city council or a city county ordinance. So there's references to Forsyth County and Winston-Salem that are still in there as we come through it. And, you know, what happened over time is what I call Band-Aid amendments. And so, you know, an event might happen, or maybe something's going on where you don't want to have something happen, or maybe there's you know, something that you want to see happen, where you do these Band-Aid amendments over time, and that results in inconsistencies and redundancies and sometimes conflicting things in different parts of your ordinance, and y'all certainly have that. And then the last thing, you know, kind of that is important is that, you know, you've got a very special, small, rural town feel there in Louisville. It's a very unique place. I really enjoyed being there. And the ordinance you have is really not specific to your town. And so, you know, you really want to have something that, as you go forward, that something is a lot more specific to your town. So general recommendations, we certainly recommend a complete reorganization as you get through the comprehensive plan process. Certainly reduce the length of the document. It's very, very long, less text, more graphics. And again, customizing towards the rural small town character that you have. You do have parts of it that are very unique to your area, but there are other parts that are not. And then again, it's to support the growth strategies that you have that come out of the comprehensive plan. So I'm gonna go through real quickly with the ordinances that you have within the UDO and talk about those. Your Definition ordinance has a lot of outdated terminology. There actually are some terminology in there that are not consistent with some of the state statute definitions. And you have a lot of staff nomenclature. So Stacy wears a lot of hats, I know already, but in your ordinance, you actually call her planning director, zoning officer, code enforcement officer, subdivision administrator. So you know, that can be confusing itself. And you know, you also have definitions that are spread throughout your code. So you do have a definitions ordinance, but you also have you have definitions that are also in different parts of your zoning ordinance and your subdivision ordinance, so you can see how that can create issues. So, you know, the other thing that really stood out to us was how many zoning districts you have for a town your size. I think between the base districts and the special districts, I think you have over 50 zoning districts, which is way too many zoning districts for a town. Really, you know, I don't think Raleigh has that many zoning districts, but you know, so I think there's a lot of opportunity to consolidate some of these districts. And you'll notice on the chart on the right-hand side where a lot of the districts were doing the same thing, and there was very little differences between you know 3 or 4 of them, and they could be consolidated into one. The other thing is the removal of special use districts. So that's actually becoming illegal once 160D comes into effect. And so you'll need to look at getting rid of those special use districts and finding out processes where just a special use permit needs to be required. So that's a whole nother thing that you'll have to deal with later on down the road, but it's important to point it out. You know, one of the things we always like to do and incorporate is dimensional standards tables. And so on the right-hand side of your screen, this makes it really easy for users to find out what their setbacks are and find out, you know, because most of your users that come into your code, they just want to find out if they can do what they want to do and what the setbacks are. And so anything that we can do to incorporate things to make that easier, we recommend. And then, of course, updating your permitted use table. I think that's something that, again, is very outdated and can certainly use an update. You know, your development standards, you certainly want to have clear expectations as far as design goes. I know that talking with Stacy, there's a lot of interpretation that are there, not only with her, but also sometimes with some of the boards that have to review these things. So you want to be context sensitive, which you have that. And then one of the things that we always like to see too is a parking maximum. So, you know, you see the image on the top right-hand corner, which is near your downtown and older shopping center, and you know, you got a lot of extra parking. And so it's always important, you know, as you go forward to let's set maximum parking. And you know, the way the world is changing, people don't need the spaces that they used to. And then as far as your development standards go, you know, graphics for your buffer standards, tree protection standards, upgrading your lighting and your signage standards. And then the last part of the zoning ordinance is dealing with processes. And, you know, again, it goes back to some of that nomenclature that you have for your staff. They have a lot of different names. But I think it's also really important to be clear on how I, as a person that wants to do business in your town, how do I get from A to Z? And I think right now that is very difficult to kind of navigate through. So bringing in flow charts, bringing in clear standards in your code will certainly help that going forward. Because I think right now you do get a little, it's kind of hard to kind of figure out how do I get from this point to this point in the development process. As far as your subdivision ordinance goes, it does appear, it has the appearance of a standalone document, even though, again, it's part of your UDO. But it does have references that conflict with other parts of your zoning ordinance and also your definitions ordinance. We recommend getting rid of the use types. So in your ordinance right now, you have an industrial subdivision type, and you have a commercial subdivision type, and you have a residential subdivision type. So we will recommend you getting rid of that. One of the things that we heard a lot of was about having clear connectivity standards and having threshold for entrances for new developments. So that's something that you really would want to analyze and bring into coming forward. And then also your open space standards, clear delineated open space standards. And the image on your screen sort of shows how a new development can come in and how you can make, instead of having tiny little pocket parks that don't connect, having a system of parks when things develop that are usable for everybody. So those are some things that we recommended with your subdivision ordinance. And then, of course, your environmental ordinance are very those are very state driven. So there aren't a whole lot of things that would need to change with those. You would just need to maintain, what the state requires for flood damage prevention and your stormwater management, and your watershed protection standards. Make sure they're current and up to current code. So as I close, I wanted to talk about, real quickly what the stakeholder interviews were like, because what's very ironic and interesting is we had worked through most of our assessment, and when the stakeholder interviews happened, they matched up with a lot of the things we had already seen. So it kind of helped to validate some of the things that we had already pointed out. So, process clarity, too many zoning districts. And again, these are things that stakeholders told us when we asked them. The ordinance not specific to Louisville, contradictions, need to promote a small town feel, the need for graphics and charts, predictability, connectivity standards, and tree preservation and open space. And so it always makes me feel a little validated as we had gone through, and the stakeholders had no idea what we had found, but they ended up coming up with a lot of the things that we had already pointed out. So it shows me that we're all on the same page on this. So as a close, I wanted to just say, we recommend, when you do get to the point and you're ready to do this, that your outline be similar to this, consolidated down to 11 articles, and it's broken down really by color. So the first 3 articles are more your legal chapters. The green is your development standards chapters, and then 9 through 11 is more your administrative chapters. And so this is what we like to see as best practices, and would certainly recommend that's how you move going forward when you do update your UDO. And then the last part is to include appendices. So you want to move your planning list out there. You want to have a development review flow chart so people can really navigate on how they need to get places. And then you want to keep up with your amendments. You want to make sure you document that and keep up with it as you go through time. And then the final product, again, is on the left-hand side of your screen. This is taken right from your UDO now. And this shows how some graphics and prominent article titles and section titles and consistent numbering, the incorporation of graphics and charts and references and really consistent numbering can really just really visually improve your document and help with the readability. And so probably took a little more time than I wanted to. I told Stacy I'd do it in 15, but I took a little longer than that. But again, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Your staff has been great to work with. We really appreciate the opportunity to do this, and hope we provided some tools that will help you, going forward to make some decisions that you need to make. And so if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those.
I have a question, please.
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a question. Yes, I'm Jane Welch. Thank you, Chad. I thought you did a very good job.
Thank you.
Really pointed out some important things. My only question was, what's your definition of a stakeholder?
A stakeholder. So what we did when I early on, I come up with different sets of groups that are involved in some capacity with either maybe they're on an advisory board, or they're somebody that does development, or somebody that's an engineer. We try to get a well-rounded group of individuals. A UDO is a technical document, right? So not every single person on the street is going to know what a UDO is or really cares what one is. So we really tried to be specific as far as I gave Stacy some categories of the folks that we want to meet with, and she kind of picked those out in the community. But it was, I believe we had citizen boards, we had some developers, we had folks from the county, we had engineers, I think we had a surveyor, I think some of the elected officials were on there. So we had some environmental folks that were there, and so we tried to get a good variety of folks that knew what the UDO is and had somewhat of an idea of what development is in Louisville, so that they could give us different perspectives on what they thought. And I don't remember all the ones, Stacy. Maybe you could chime in on all the folks that were there, but that was the different types of categories. It wasn't just one group. We tried to capture a lot of different groups.
Great. Thank you. That answered it.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Chad, real quick, Dr. Tyler. Chad, if you could stop sharing your screen, I think the council would like to see. I think you're the only one that can stop sharing your screen.
Okay. There you go. How's that?
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, the question I've got The question I've got regarding a UDO in general, my recollection from a long time ago was that when we were adopting the UDO, it was to provide some consistency between Louisville and other surrounding jurisdictions. That may be faulty, but that's what I remember about it. And so the reference you made to like the definitional things from 1967 and so forth, we weren't even in existence then. So I think that's just for historical purposes. I think that's the reason that the document reads like it does and looks like it does, because we were adopting a document that was already in existence. In another, either in the county or between the county or among the county and Louisville and Winston-Salem. And that's what I remember about how it came into being.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It sure does. Yeah.
Any other questions for Chad?
I have a question. Jean Marie.
Hey there.
Hey,
Jean
hey
Marie.
Chad, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My couple of questions. So you had one on your previous slide that you were sharing this with council as well as the planning board. Obviously, everything's been turned topsy-turvy and the planning board hasn't met. Has the information that you've shared tonight been shared with planning board? Or did I misread that?
Yeah, so Stacy's had this for a while, and so we were trying to do this, back in, gosh, I think it might have been March or April.
Okay.
So we had planned to do it then. I don't know that we were able to get on the planning board agenda, but I know that it was shared with them, and if there were any comments we received, or I don't want to speak for Stacy, but I know that was what the plan was.
Sure.
And if they had any comments, we would incorporate into it. But
Okay.
I'll let her answer that question.
Yeah, for the most part, like Chad said, we did want to actually do this presentation to the planning board. That was our initial plan to do so, but since the planning board has not been meeting, we were unable to do so. We have not had meetings, and so therefore we have not actually had to be able to come together to get comments on it. But like I said, we wanted to go ahead and get before council, since we were moving forward with council meetings and everything like that, to be able to share this with you guys.
But so planning board has received the presentation we just saw, basically, in some kind of electronic form, or
no, I believe they've gotten the document, but they have not received the actual presentation that Chad did.
It's hot off the press. It's hot off the
Yeah.
press. But what I can do is, after this, I will be happy to put it into a PDF format, and so that you can have it and do whatever you want to do with it.
that was my next question. Yeah, because it's very helpful. Would you mind one final thing too? I think it will cue up some of the discussions we'll have later on, especially with budget. Could you pull up this slide, Chad, early on, where you show the comprehensive planning process and what you've done as part of a larger process?
I'm going to try if I can share my screen again. Let's see.
So I think we're going to be thinking about this as we're going through the process, Stacy, whether we're talking about planning budget now or queuing up for next year. So I just want to highlight that again in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. I got you.
Yeah, it was on maybe slide.
Yeah, that one.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So when in other communities, we work and do this all over the place, and I actually was in local government for 20 years before I started doing consulting work for local government. So I worked in planning and administration, and it's a passion of mine. But the typical process of what you want to do is you're doing exactly the right things, right? So you have some things that need to be updated. So you've gone in and you've kind of created the blueprints, right, on where you want to go. But that next phase is important because your comprehensive plan and sort of your future land use map helps you make decisions, going forward, and very important decisions. And so, you know, when that is done and you have that adopted or close to that adoption, you'll have more of a comprehensive update to your UDO. And that's when you can take some of these things that we've shown that, you know, need to be done regardless. And you can incorporate some of these new strategies that are going to come out of that.
Mhm.
And so the end result is your comprehensive plan is sort of your vision. And the way you make that happen is through your development codes, right? And so that's the process that you're going through. And that's kind of why I put that on there, because, you know, you're doing it the right way. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do a new UDO and then do a comprehensive plan, because then you're going to turn around and you're going to have to do an update to your UDO. And so that would not be, I would not be advising you well if that's the way I told you to go. So yeah, I would certainly say that's where you are. You take you know what you need to do. Now you have your blueprints as far as where your development codes need to go. And now you need to think bigger picture with your comprehensive plan. And that's your next step.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was, yeah, less a question. It was more for the audience, frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
as you know, I served on the planning board as planning board chair. What you've done has been a long time in the making, and it's fantastic. So
Thank you.
for purposes of folks that are watching who are board and committee members, I know many people are hot to say, hey, yeah, we're looking forward to the whole comprehensive planning process. This shows how that all fits together with not just that, but something we have later on in the agenda with an RFP for the comprehensive plan and something else. So thank you. Well done. And we look forward to having the document.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
One more question, please, Chad.
Yes, ma'am.
When is your estimated date for presentation of completion to the council for adoption?
As far
I think there
as,
might
I
be-
guess I'm confused by your question. So this is just, what this is, Stacey, do you want to say something? Sorry.
No, you go ahead, Chad. I'm sure it's probably the same thing.
Okay, so there's no action with this tonight. All this is it's an FYI information for you that has, you know, we've really just taken our time and gone through and given you, like I said, sort of the guidebook on where you go from here. So there's no action that needs to be taken or anything like that with this. Now, when you move into your comprehensive plan and your UDO, that's when you would have those things that would go through. Now, you know, the two processes you're about to go into are not fast things. They don't happen quick. You know, a comprehensive plan update can take about a year, and then a UDO update can take another year or so. So, you know, you're about to embark on a journey that can take up to 2 years, you know, sometimes a little bit longer. But you know, it's an important process, and you need to take your time when you do it.
So in other words, you just gave us the blueprint, and now we take it from here.
That's correct. Yes,
And your
ma'am.
job is done. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for Chad? Chad, thank you so much. For Stacey, any closing comments here before we let Chad slide out?
Well, I just want to thank Chad for the great work that he's done. Like Jean Marie said, I was super excited. It might be my planning nerd stuff coming out, but I was super excited about this project, and I'm happy to see what came out of that. It was a lot of what I anticipated coming out of it, just in using the UDO that we have in day-to-day operations. But and I'm even more excited about what's to come with our comprehensive plan, and then hopefully after that, everything coming together with an update to our UDO, reorganization, you know, more user-friendly graphics and all that good stuff. So I was very, very pleased with the process thus far. So thank you, guys.
Very
Mayor,
good.
Thank you all. Y'all have a great evening. Thank you for having me.
Mayor,
Hang on just for a second, Chad. Mayor Hunt.
Yeah.
I've got one other question.
Okay.
You mentioned, I think, during the presentation that there are a couple of items in there that are going to be in conflict with changes in the law.
Yeah.
So when do those changes, when must they be made?
Yeah, that's a great question. So towards the end of last year, the General Assembly made some changes to land use regulations. Probably one of the biggest changes comprehensively that's been done in about 20 or 30 years. So as it stands right now, with planning and development regulations, the county has one set of rules and the cities have one set of rules. They're under different statute names, different numbers, different everything. There are a lot of similarities between the two, but if you're in the county, you're governed by one way, and if you're in the city, you're governed by another as far as, you know, planning and development goes. So what our friends in Raleigh decided to do was that they wanted to combine those. So there's no longer a county set of regulations and a city set of regulations. They're all together. And that's what's called Chapter 160D. And that in the end result is going to be good because you're going to have more consistency in processes, in definitions, in permit styles. So you won't have this big difference between, you know, these huge differences as far as some of the basic fundamentals of planning and zoning regulations. Now that is supposed to, right now, as it stands, be done by January 1st of 2021. And so they are in the process of pushing that. And I don't think it's been done yet, but I have every intention to believe that will get pushed till August of 2021. So, you know, it hasn't changed yet, but that would require, you know, Stacy to spend some time going through and highlighting certain things that would need to change. Some of those are process driven, they're definitions driven. We're actually helping communities out right now doing that in some other places in the state that are in a similar position as you. They just said, look, we don't know where to start. We don't know where to begin. Can y'all help us? And we've been doing that. But the end result's going to be a much better consolidated set of things, but it is going to be a little bit of a rocky road as it gets through there. But as it stands right now today, January 1st, 2021 is when those things would need to be done.
Dr. Sadler, that's
you.
a priority for the planning board right now. I guess I'm hoping that we can start meeting again sooner rather than later. Bo and I have both taken a look at, and we all, Hank included and Joyce, went to some training for the 160D changes that have to take place, and have kind of started looking at that. Like Chad said, we are very hopeful, and I can't ever really find, has it passed or has it not passed? As far as
it has, yeah, I don't think it has. I searched yesterday, and I don't think it has passed yet. But
It
I
has.
don't know. I don't have
has,
any
and
reason to believe it won't be.
The School of Government has put different blogs out about it in regards to the extended date being either in July or August 1st of 2021 rather than January. So there'll be text amendments coming your way.
Yeah.
Yes, Joyce.
I was going to tell you that Bo and I had copied off the actual legislation. The legislation has passed it, and it is approved now. Instead of January 1st, it's August.
August.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured it would. You know, and the other thing that it makes sense because one of the things that's also changing with 160D is that you're now required to have a comprehensive plan, where before only CAMA coastal communities were technically required to have one. But now if you want to have the authority to do planning and zoning in your community, you have to have a comprehensive plan adopted. And that's another part. But you know, obviously you guys have one and you're looking to update it. So you're in a good place as far as that goes.
Ms. Hunt, you had a question?
Thanks.
Yeah, I did. Hey, Chad. This is Melissa Hunt. I had a quick question. You had referenced earlier about you guys primarily work with a lot of small, or that's your preference, with small and mid-sized communities. Do you have any communities that we could go to and reference, just if we're just wanting to inform ourselves about what somebody that's done a recent comp update or gone through this process, that come to mind that you can Kind
Yeah, I mean, you know, what you could probably reach out to a lot of the communities that we worked in. You know,
Okay.
we're working on several right now. I'm trying to think how many are. You know, we've got several small towns that we've worked on. I could certainly send you some that you could look at. You could even go on our website and kind of see some of the things that we've
Okay.
done as well. We're right now we're finishing up one in Alamance County, which is not too far away from y'all. But I could certainly direct you to a lot of different places. And in fact, what I can do is when I get the presentation printed off and send it to Stacy, I'll send her some information for y'all so that you can have that and take a look at some things and look for some references of you know, some things that have been done recently.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. Anybody else? Very good. As Chad pointed out, this is the first step in a long process that we'll be doing over the next few years, but it's really going to be fundamental with setting the course for our town and making sure that we continue to do what we've done in the past, and that's to base our planning and zoning decisions on sound, rational logic and planning. Very good, Chad. Thank you very much. Good to see
Thank you. Y'all have a great night. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Ms. Walker, I'm gonna need your help on this next name here. We do want to recognize Aiden and Desiree Moraes.
Yes.
I did okay. Very good. Aiden and Desiree took part in a program or a process called Mask Winston-Salem. Some of you may have read about it on the Winston-Salem Journal, seen it on TV, and it was a group that has actually produced a little over 200,000 masks and has been distributing them throughout Winston-Salem. But we wanted to recognize Aiden and Desiree because they're part of our student leadership committee. And once again, we're presenting to you some kids that have been through our process and understand the value of community participation and certainly doing things to make our community better. So kids, great job. Hats off. That's a salute to you. Very good. Hank, you have the next item, which is some direction on remote meetings.
Yes, actually, I'm going to give this over to Joyce and Bo for the most of the presentation. But what we have done, and for your consideration and discussion this evening, is an amendment to our existing policy allowing the council to operate, I guess, with someone not present. And they'll go over what we've done and what we propose, and then we can have some discussion after that.
Very good.
Joyce or Bo, who would like to start?
Bo first, because he has some legislative stuff.
Okay.
Thank you. There are a couple of things to kind of talk about. First of all, and I think I mentioned it early on before the meeting, I think everyone may not have yet been here. In the same legislative day, I think that the extension of the 160D deadline in state new session law 2020 number 3, the legislature has passed, among a lot of other things, but for these purposes, they passed a provision that deals with remote meetings when the state, through the governor or the General Assembly, has declared a state of emergency. This is separate and apart from the remote policy, and I'm looking at the two things here. The remote policy that you have before you in your agenda package is for situations where the mayor or the manager has declared, well, a couple of things. One, our remote policy for council members has a certain number of conditions, and I think those have been around in our previous remote meeting policy. But what we thought about doing, because we don't know how long it's going to last, where we cannot meet in person, we wanted to set up a possibility for boards and committees to also potentially meet remotely. And so the remote policy for that is here. and that's what's before you, is makes those adjustments. It also recognizes the legislation that was passed this past Monday on May 4th. So you'll see there's a reference there in the change in language, but it also allows the council to allow for boards and committees to meet remotely when, and this still would require for boards and committees only that a state or a declaration of a state of emergency for the town of Louisville has to have been declared in order for the boards and committees to potentially meet remotely. The format and all of that has not really substantially changed, but the difference is that instead of just the council being able to meet remotely under circumstances for personal illness or disability, employment situations, or family or other emergencies, or a kind of a catch-all where things are logistically impossible to attend. But it also provides for boards and committees to meet remotely, but only when there's been a declaration of a state of emergency, which is different than how the council is treated. So the essence of this was to provide for boards and committees to be able to meet remotely when, and in this case, we have dual situations. Right now we have, the mayor has declared a state of emergency for the town of Louisville, so that this, if this had been passed, would apply to boards and committees. And then we also have the governor's declaration of state of emergency for the state. So the easy information, easy reference here is that what you have before you just allows boards and committees to meet remotely in the circumstances where we have a declaration of the state of emergency. That's the kind of the long and the short of this policy itself. However, we also have the legislation that passed, and it has some interesting provisions in it as well. Our staff has done a very, very good job in developing the remote meeting policy for council, which would also be potentially applicable to boards and committees if you decide to pass this amended ordinance and new policy. But you as the council are now, and that's why I mentioned that you needed to have a roll call vote. That's one of the provisions that is now in this new legislation. And I don't know whether you'd like for me to look at that now, or you want to just separate that out from the town's remote policy. I can proceed however you'd like.
Hank, would you be specific on what kind of direction you need from the council this evening?
Well, really, in our discussion at Town Hall and with Bo, we've got a couple of things. The policy, as it previously had been written, allowed members of town council to participate remotely under extenuating circumstances. And this was not just because you were on vacation, but you may have a family emergency or some other situation has caused you to have to participate remotely. So really, for council, take into consideration a lot of what Bo has talked about and deliberate amongst yourselves and to yourselves as to whether or not this is a type of policy that we would want to extend to boards and committees. Just throw it out there. That's what can be considered and the questions that you need to ask.
I believe when we first, Ms. Walker, go ahead.
Well, what we threw in was, if everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at it, at the very beginning of the remote participation policy, you'll notice that we put the state of emergency that's declared by the state, the governor, or either the General Assembly first, so that becomes the hierarchy, and we would actually be following that before we actually follow anything that we do. Again, if you take a look at it, when it goes down to what the remote participation actually is to allow boards and committees they still would need to follow, and we're not talking about a state emergency as it is today. We're only talking about, I have a scheduled meeting and I'm on the coast and we have a hurricane and I can't get across the bridge. So those permissions are still there for just a general board and committee meeting. So that's kind of the difference right now, just so you can read through it and take a look at the provisions that have been changed.
Right. As it is drafted tonight, what is before you is boards and committees could only meet when there's a declaration of state of emergency by the town. The other situations, illness and all of that, would not apply to boards and committees as it does to council today.
Ms. Hunt?
So is this applicable as well to MSD? I know that sometimes they're set apart in some situations, but would this apply to that particular?
It's applicable to all boards and committees.
Okay.
So whatever you pass is applicable to all.
And has this been shared with boards and committees at all?
It
No, it
has
has not.
not.
First.
Thank you. Thank you.
Plus, there's not been a way to share it with boards and committees.
Right, Mike, can I address something here?
Sure.
So let me take a stab, because this is muddy. and I'm as a reminder, this was born out of some of the discussion we had last time about the board and committee reboot. Remember that, guys, at the last meeting? So the four of us, Joyce, Hank, Stacy, and I, followed up and looked at several different things, one of which was the policy, and of course Bo was plugged into that, but the intent of the policy and moving it forward quickly was to say, gee, if the boards and committees tell us that they need to meet, we need a policy that allows for that, because right now they can't. So that is the pressing item. If, for example, the planning board says, geez, we really want to meet, in the next 30 days, we don't have a policy in place to allow for that. Correct, Joyce and Bo?
Correct.
That's
Right.
correct.
So what we're trying to do is get something available quickly to address that. So that was number one. The other piece that's more of a long-term perspective, which is what Hank, Joyce, Stacy, and I, as we have been meeting over the past couple of weeks, was to say, well, let's make sure we have a policy in place that if you're not having a state of emergency, that if there were ever a need to do something, that the policy could address that as well. Well, that's where we ran into a little bit of mud, because we had some differences of opinions. So we are now, I don't want to get ahead of the agenda, but what we've been doing is reaching out to boards and committee members, because remember the project of the board and committee survey is to find out what they think. So to your point, Melissa, this hasn't been shared with anyone because it was a policy that folks were trying to get on the books so they could ultimately meet remotely. So that's where we are.
So let me peel this onion back just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
The first question I think that staff would like direction from is, do we want to extend the opportunity for boards and committees to meet when we have a state of emergency declared, just as the council's allowed to?
Right.
Is that correct, Bo?
Yeah, that's the threshold for tonight.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Considered.
Council member, any thoughts?
I would be in favor of that.
Other council members?
In favor.
Again, it sounds logical to me. I think I see some thumbs up and I see a number of heads nodding. So I think to the first question, Hank, is that in those situations where we have a state of emergency, that we should extend to our boards and committees the opportunity to also meet remotely if possible.
Very good.
Should I throw in the survey?
Not quite yet.
No, not yet.
Not quite yet.
And the only pushback that I have on this is, of course, I think it makes sense if we are no longer under a state of emergency, there could be a reason for meeting remotely. This policy would not allow for that.
Yeah, I think that's the second part of the question that I think, Hank, we give you direction on the first part, which is state of emergency. Yes, thumbs up.
Yes,
They have
that's
the opportunity. Now, Yeah, to frame the second question just a little bit, and Dr. Sadler, you were here, Fred, I think you were part of this, where we attempted to do some remote meetings when I think yours truly was out of town, and it was I was attempting to call in for a conference call, and it turned into a complete disaster. But I think the discussion that we had around that period of time was it was not the council's preference in times when it wasn't an emergency to provide for remote access by any council member. Ken, is that your recollection, Fred?
Yes, and I'd like to have an example of a situation that would necessitate a remote meeting when we're not in an emergency situation.
I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm having a lot of internet problems right now, but I will say this. The first time that I served 8 years, I missed one meeting in 8 years, and that was for my mother's birthday. Okay. So if you signed up for this, or you signed up for a committee or whatever, you need to be there. If you can't, you're absent. That's the bottom line of it. You should not be able to, I shouldn't be able to sit at the beach and participate.
Bo, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
The policy as it regards, there's a difference between the council or any board meeting remotely and a member of the council being present on the telephone when the majority of the council is meeting in present. So that's a little bit different too. And I think the way the policy is written now, that type of participation would not have to be done after a declaration, but only the group as a whole meeting remotely. Am I correct on that one?
Well, I think for the council, both apply. So if there's a declaration of state of emergency, then we would say that the item D under section 1D applies to participate in meetings which would make it logistically impossible to attend the scheduled meeting. We'd say tonight's meeting, whether or not there was a state of emergency, the meeting's logistically impossible because we can't get together. There is a state of emergency, so it applies to the group as a whole. But we also, the existing policy allows for individual members to seek that to happen, and that's already in place. That's not part of what's being proposed tonight. The only change is to allow boards and committees to meet remotely only when there's been a declaration of state of emergency. But right now, now we've got an overriding state statute that's applicable that allows that if you're inclined to do that. So it's a little different.
Okay. So the amendment that we have does not propose to allow an individual member of the Parks and Rec Committee, for instance, to phone it in the event that they are not able to attend due to circumstances.
That is correct. And the drafting, we try to be careful with the drafting so that would only allow boards and committees. Council is really not affected by this. The policy is what the policy is right now. You may want to revisit it at some point, but this was solely done to craft the potential for boards and committees to meet when there's a declaration of state of emergency as a group and only then.
So you really don't need council direction on the second part of this discussion. It was just on the first.
Yes, that's correct. I was under the impression we were giving individual members who were not able to attend council or committee or board meetings the ability to do that, and apparently I was mistaken.
Well, you've already done that.
But that's for member of council, not boards and committees.
Not boards and committees, that's correct.
Okay. So you have what we need on number one, Ms. Foster. I think we need to come back and address the question that you're talking about, which is, does council want to have that discussion about in times when we aren't under a state of emergency, do we want to allow individual board members to be able to participate remotely?
Correct, or some hybrid thereof. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen tonight. And to Melissa's point, and the fact that we all agreed that we wanted to survey boards and committees, I think will be important to find out. Having served on the planning board for 6-7 years, I too, Fred, went and rarely, if ever, missed. So I think we've got folks who are plugged in that regard, but they may have some ideas, especially in 2020, as to why it might make sense to ensure we have a policy that reflects that potential need. So I don't have the answer, Dr. Sadler, for you right now, but I would like to ask the boards and committee members what their position is on that second piece.
So we'll table discussion on part 2 of this until after we have that process completed. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
And
Very
so
good. Hanky? I'm sorry, Bo, go ahead.
What happened?
would we be adding this to next week's meeting for this policy as presently drafted, which doesn't deal with part 2?
I believe that would be our direction to staff to do that, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll add that to the agenda for next week.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Is now the good time, or do you want me to wait until administrative reports to talk about, well, I may end up having to talk about it ahead of time, but we've touched on the subject. Maybe now is the best time, since we're talking about remote policy meetings anyway. Is that okay, Mayor?
I have no idea what you're getting at, but just forge ahead.
Okay, well, on Monday of this week, North Carolina State Legislature passed Session Law 2023, and it includes a lot of things. Among those are a remote meeting legislation for when the governor or the General Assembly declares a state of emergency, and it authorizes, but doesn't require, meetings by public bodies, which frankly would include boards and committees, but I think our own council can decide whether or not boards and committees can do that, and that's what you'll be doing next week. But North Carolina Legislature, while we were working on this remote policy, passed their own and included a lot of things. And I don't want to go through the whole thing because I don't think we have to. Staff that prepared Louisville's remote meeting policy did a really good job, but a couple of things that I probably do need to highlight, one of which is all votes must be done by roll call. We do require streaming of our meetings. We're doing that. Quorum may be established as it is by electronic meeting. One thing that can happen, and this was a little bit muddy as we were talking about this in the past, but it's been clarified here. If a quorum's been established and we lose communication, I saw Fred's communication was coming in and out a little bit. Mike, you had some trouble early on in the meeting. If we lose contact with a member, two things. One, if that is sufficient to destroy a quorum, it will end a quorum. That's unlike an in-person meeting. In an in-person meeting, if somebody leaves, the quorum remains. You can't destroy a quorum by leaving. But if your communication is lost, technically, then it does take you out of the picture for all purposes, both establishment of a quorum and also for voting. And that's different than our default situation is a failure to vote is a yes vote. Leaving without being excused is a yes vote if a vote comes up. If, however, if our connections with one or more of you is lost, that is not a vote of any kind, one way or the other. So that's probably the one other thing that might happen. So Fred, if you fade out, it's not a yes vote, it's not a no vote, it's not a vote. And that's not something that's normally allowed in our voting process. The other thing that's important, well, I do three things. One, public hearings can be held with an electronic meeting. And there's a potential for a rezoning public hearing to come before the council, and those can be held by this format, as long as we make sure that the public can participate. But one thing that's a little bit different is that following the public hearing, the public has 24 hours to submit additional written information that it may wish the council to consider. So you may not act on a public hearing the night of the public hearing. You must wait at least 24 hours to do that. You can do that a couple of ways. You could recess the meeting until the following day at a time certain. You could call a special meeting for the purpose of doing that, or you could simply wait until your next regularly scheduled meeting. But you can't do it that same meeting time. You'll have to wait until at least 24 hours in order to do that. Closed sessions are allowed. Oh, is there a question about public hearings before I go on? So that's the only difference. They have to be noticed like normal. They can be held. You have to allow for the public to see and participate in the public hearings. Quasi-judicial hearings are allowed. I'd highly recommend that we don't do it. The legislation is very shaky in my view. It has this catch-all provision that says all due process rights are protected, but it doesn't say what they are or how to protect them. And so I still wouldn't recommend doing quasi-judicial hearings remotely. And then closed sessions are also.
You've already told us a lot more than we need to know for this evening. But when we get ready to come up with a public hearing and we have that discussion, I'm sure you'll refresh us on that process you just talked about. But thank you for that refresher. That was important to know.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else I have to tell you tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Bo. Any questions for Bo on that real quick? Okay. Now, next item is mine, and this is just for council consideration. With the phase 1 and phase 2 and potentially well into phase 3, we'll be faced with situations of requiring masking for many people who go out in public. We have a number of small businesses that can or cannot get their hands on masking. I received some information from a company that does masks that are substantially less expensive than the masks that are being produced locally. The caveat here is the masks are being produced in China. The question is, would we want to order a batch of those masks and give them out to our businesses so that they have that opportunity to provide those to their customers? So let's not deal with where they're coming from first. Let's just deal with the issue about, I believe we can get 2,000 masks at 35 cents each versus what the other two companies in Winston-Salem is providing them for, which is about $1.85 each.
So are you suggesting that we just provide the access to the businesses for these masks, or that we pay for them?
Ken, I think we'd have to buy them and buy them through the town. I mean, we could resell them, but my thought was we would just provide small businesses with that investment.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Horn, is there any way to see the quality of these masks? Because you hear a lot about different qualities.
Yeah, these are FDA and CDC approved for not for hospital or healthcare workers, but for general public.
Who's talking? I can hear what's going on.
So the question I have then for Bo is, if we do this, can it be limited? The distribution be limited only to businesses, or if citizens come by and want one, then are they entitled to one as well?
Yeah, and that was what, as this was being discussed, I was thinking the same thing that you were, Ken, and I think my initial thinking is that we have to make those available to anyone who would want them, because we can't differentiate. And I don't think that was the intention, was to differentiate. We want to make them certainly available to anyone that might need them, provided that, now we can't limit it to Louisville folks.
Right.
We need to have people lining up from out of town to come by and get them. But we have to, and I think what was the cost that you were talking about, Mike? 35 cents?
Yeah, I think they're 35 cents each, Bo. And I think we can buy them in quantities of a box is $700, and I believe it has 2,000 masks in it.
Okay, I think this is similar to when we give away pens and pins and other kinds of things, because we're not talking about any substantial cost. So I think we'd be okay there as long as we make them available to anyone who might want to get them.
You'd certainly be in
What
excess
is
of all
it?
the businesses at 2,000 or 1,000.
What's the delivery time on the masks?
I believe, Jane, June 1st.
Mayor, I have a question.
And again, I just wanted to float this out and see what you all thought. Ms. Hunt?
What would be the distribution method? Would they just be left here in town hall and people would come and access them if they were a local business and or a resident of Louisville? I mean, I think logistically we need,
Yeah, I haven't really thought through logistics. It was just the general idea. And then we can think through if we support the general idea, we can think about logistically how to do that.
And Mike, question from Jean Marie. So when the genesis of the idea came from a need expressed to you?
Well, the genesis of the idea came from two things. Number one is that folks are being asked to mask when they go out in public. That melded with some information I received from a supplier. That I receive stuff from suppliers all the time that I pass on to Hank or whomever, but this is one of those ones that I wanted to bring up to the council to see if it's something we wanted to engage in. I'm fine either way, but I just wanted to make it known that we have an opportunity to provide that should we wish to do that. Thoughts?
And I don't know if you can hear me or not, but let me chime.
We can sort of hear you.
Sorry, but I've been dealing with the last suppliers that are distributors as an example. First, toilet, that's all I got to say at this point in time.
Fred, I'm sorry, we missed your point completely.
Start there.
Fred, you may turn off your video for a moment so we can hear you.
I apologize. I'm gonna go change locations and see if I can get better.
Well,
Okay.
Fred, it may help your audio if you turn your video off.
Well, let's see how I can do that. Is that video?
Well, we can hear you pretty well right now.
Stop video. I just stopped video. Okay. Can you hear me any better?
And we're hearing you well.
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear
sir.
you better.
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. Anyhow, I've been dealing with this for the last 5 to 6 weeks as a safety professional. I pretty much know what's out there when it comes to masks. And if we have an opportunity to buy a mask for 35 cents a piece, I would tuck my tail and run before I pass them out to anybody. I know it seems like a good thing to do, but the quality of them probably are terrible. I'm not talking about where they come from or anything else. I'm also concerned about why the town is stepping up and buying them for individual businesses. There's a local in Yadkin County, a place that I have bought 25 dozen masks to pass out to people that are in my workforce. It's shop.enderiamills.com. You can buy them by the dozen there. They're $2 a piece. They're high quality. They're American made, and I'm not promoting them. I'm just telling you where a resource is. And I forwarded this to my corporate guys, and we have sites all across the country now are buying masks there. The United States Marine Corps has bought 5,000 dozen from this particular company in Yadkinville. But at 35 cents a piece, I don't know where those are coming from, and I would be scared to death of them. I'd never hand them out to people I had responsibility for.
Okay. So there, Fred, since you're a safety professional, we'll follow your lead on that one.
Mike.
Ms. Hunt, yes.
Yeah, one other thing. I mean, we do have a public safety committee that, you know, once they meet, if this is something that, I mean, I agree that we can take Fred's direction on this, but for an agenda item, that may be something that they can discuss in detail regarding suppliers and if this is a good initiative for us to do as a town, because I'm not sure if this COVID-19 or the next thing is going to be going anywhere necessarily. So it may be a good agenda item for us to propose for our public safety committee.
Well, again, I think thanks, Melissa. I think this was really just kind of one of those. Let's put the idea out there. Is it something we want to consider? Not where we buy them, who we buy them from, but is this something we want to consider doing for our residents and businesses? And if the answer is yes, we'll proceed with it and we'll run it through public safety. If it's no, then we won't. What do you guys think?
I'm still thinking that there'll be other people in town that have businesses, but they're not in Louisville, and they'll say, why can't we have one? I have a problem with just giving it to the businesses. And I like Fred's comment. We could tell the businesses about Indira Meals at $2 a piece. They may very well be happy just to order what they each need. If there's not a quantity limit, Fred.
Well, I'm not seeing an overwhelming rush to the barn on this one, so why
Like
don't
I
we
said.
just move on to the next item? We good with that? Very good, thank you.
Yes.
For at least considering. Okay, now we do have several items that we're required to take action on. Ryan, I believe you have the first one.
Yes, sir. We have some trees. We had a storm, I guess it's been 3 weeks ago now, had a windstorm, and we had some trees that were taken down in the right of way, and those have been addressed. But we also had some pine trees that are leaning on the Moser property that was given to us several years ago on Louis Savannah, as well as the tops of some trees that were broken out. So it's a safety concern. So we need to take control of that and take those trees down.
And Ryan, you're proposing to do this, I guess, in the amount of $2,950?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He needs a budget ordinance amendment.
Gotcha. Okay. Any questions for Ryan on this one? Ms. Hunt, I'm sorry, Ms. Foster.
Yes. So Ryan, what I hear you saying is there's damage and there's a safety concern. Is this any of the heritage trees, or you're talking about sort of a scrub pine and the tops of?
They're all pine trees. I believe there's 4 pine trees that are leaning, and then there are 2 large pine trees that the tops are broken out and they're hanging in the trees. And as you all may know or may not know, there are 2 Louisville residents that still live on that property that have lifetime rights. It's just a safety concern.
Okay. So nothing that the Louisville Beautification Committee would have any issue with. This is consistent with.
No, ma'am. No, they're all scrub pines.
Okay. Thank you. Yes,
ma'am.
Any other questions for Ryan? Very good.
Motion to approve ordinance 2020-021.
Mr. Franklin makes the motion.
Second.
I believe Dr. Sadler makes the second. Any further discussion? Mr. Smithman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Very good. Dr. Sadler, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Welch?
Aye.
Ms. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Franklin?
Aye.
Ms. Foster?
Aye.
Very good. That's unanimous. Go forth and cut. You also have the next one for us, I believe.
That's you, Mike.
So it's
Did you vote aye?
I did. I voted aye. Yeah, that's it. Unanimous. Yeah.
It's that time again for spring paving.
Oh.
And I have decided to pick the roads to Sequoia Drive, Yakima Court, Conrad Circle and Jennings Road to be resurfaced in the amount of $263,309.07. Any questions?
Ryan, for clarification,
Yes, Ryan, you
majority of
said
this
you
work is going
decided.
to be on Sequoia.
I'm sorry, Hank, what'd you say?
For clarification, the majority of this work is performed on Sequoia.
Yes, the entire length of Sequoia will be milled and repaved. It's in bad shape. The whole entire road is alligator cracked, which is, if nobody knows what that is, it's just small cracks all the way across the entire surface. Ms. Welch, you had a question?
Yes. Were these roads then in line to be done next, or is it a condition factor?
Sequoia was in line. It was on the survey list. It saves money for the town if you can try to stay in one area so the crew doesn't have to move around to parts of town. That's why I chose Yakima, which is, it's a very small portion of Yakima. It just has an issue that is called slippage. So they'll just be doing a full depth patch on that. Conrad Road was chosen partly because we did a stormwater project on it last year. It was going to have to be partly paved anyway. Half that road is in bad shape. Go ahead, Joyce.
It's Conrad Circle, not Road. So they don't get it mixed up.
Excuse me. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Conrad Circle. I apologize. And then Jennings is a road that connects from Louisville, Vienna to the Lowe's Food Shopping Center. We have constantly had pothole issues for a long time, and it's just time for that road to be paved.
Question and comment.
Ms. Foster,
Thank
yes.
you.
Okay, so I'm sure this is correct in the contract, but it says Yadkin Valley paving.
Should be Valley.
Right? I presume that was
Valley.
And then I think this might be moot, but I just want to double check. So I had gotten a request for proposal for some personal home work from Yadkin Valley Paving. We didn't do anything with it, but there's some conversation that might be happening in the future. Does that affect me and my vote as a council person, or is me just mentioning that enough and sufficient?
Well, mentioning it is appreciated, Jean Marie, but you do not, this would not be, unless you were to get some sort of a benefit by virtue of the fact that you voted for this tonight, assuming you do, this would not be a violation.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing, I know a number of years ago there was a paving plan that was developed, and is this continuing the execution of that plan?
Yes, sir. Well, Sequoia, like I said again, Sequoia is on that list for roads that are in dire need of paving. Yakima, which is off of Beb Willow, is close by there, so I figured we'd hit it. I just didn't want to. I could have done portions of Sequoia, but since the whole road needs to be redone, I felt that it needed to be done at one time.
But you are still in general working off of a plan?
Yes, yes, sir.
When is the last time we had that plan reviewed or our roads reviewed and that plan updated?
Hank, am I correct in saying it was 3 years ago?
That sounds about right.
I believe that's correct. Next,
Yeah.
we're doing another one. We're doing another one next year, I believe.
Yeah.
There's
That's
one in
right.
the budget
Pam,
that we'll talk about.
Ms. Hunt, I think you had your hand going up.
I think they answered it just now as to when the next one would be done. Thank you.
And Ryan, you mentioned about mobilization. It's pretty good mobilization to go from Sequoia to Conrad Circle.
well, it is, but it's all in general area of one side of the town. There is a little bit of distance there.
Yeah,
We are assuming, or I'm assuming that we're making this road selection so so our residents know we're not just randomly selecting roads to pave. We are doing this based upon a paving plan that we had performed for us by an independent engineering firm 3 years ago, and we're working our way down that list, and it was based by priority of road condition. We are due to update that list next year, and we'll talk about that when we come to our public works budget. But we can feel confident that these indeed are roads that are high on that priority list, and we're not skipping other people's roads to do these.
One more question. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't know when the contract or the discussions occurred, but a lot has changed in a short period of time. The price of oil has plummeted, and therefore asphalt and paving, I would presume, has also plummeted. Can you just address how that fits into this contract for the 263,000?
I did ask that question to both the folks that bid on it. Unfortunately, the oil price, you use oil obviously in petroleum in the paving process, but the price of the paving has not come down dramatically. It has come down some, but it's nothing like your gas price.
Okay. So the labor and all the expense associated with grading, et cetera, is still there. So you saw a little bit of impact from the decrease in the oil prices, but overall you check that out. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Hey,
ma'am.
Joyce,
Ms. Hunt, yes.
Joyce, can I get can you send me a copy of that payment plan at some point, or the last one that was done, please?
Actually, Ryan, you have that, correct?
I do. I can send that to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
How about shoot that out to all council members so we can refresh ourselves with it?
Okay.
I'm sure we'll get questions when we start seeing roads paved. Ms. Welch?
Yes, I just wanted to say, when I asked Ryan, were these roads on the list? Like Dr. Sadler said, I remembered we had a list of priorities. But I also want to add that I think we need to also defer to Ryan's opinion as he looks at the roads and which ones are more important than maybe that's next on the list. So just wanted to include his opinion when we are deciding on or going over the list again.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Welch. Any other questions for Ryan? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the paving contract.
So moved.
Ms. Welch makes the motion.
Second.
I guess that's Mr. Smitherman.
That is correct.
Mr. Smitherman makes the second. David, you've disappeared from my screen. So you're here someplace. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Very good. So Ms. Welch makes the motion. Mr. Smitherman, there you are. Mr. Smitherman makes the second. Any further discussion? With that, we'll vote. Mr. Smitherman?
Yes.
Dr. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Foster?
I vote aye, yes.
Mr. Franklin?
Aye.
Ms. Hunt?
Aye.
Ms. Welch?
Aye.
And the mayor will make it unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, Hank, we're down to manager's report.
Okay, first item of business on my manager's report is everyone will recall, at least for this council, one, if not two, discussions on the issue of signage and speeding out on Yadkinville Highway with Vienna Village, and they had come in and they had this request for consideration for us to do something to hopefully mitigate a perceived problem that they had out there on Yadkinville Highway. The end of the last discussion that we had at council level was that I was asked to go back to Mr. J.P. Couch of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And if I refresh your memories, he had denied the placement of pedestrian signage. Councilman Franklin is absolutely correct that the signage in question is allowed by the MUTCD. Mr. Couch's objection to doing this is that he thinks and feels as a matter of policy with the DOT, there must be some criteria to I guess, compare these requests against in order to decide whether or not the placement of signage is warranted. His fear and concern for the DOT is literally the fact that in his conversation with me, that he has a similar type of signage request from someone in Forsyth County literally every month of the year. A certain amount of criteria for which to judge the complaint, to go out there and observe whether or not they see people out there, whether or not, you've heard me say this before in his justification for it. So the long and the short of the story is that his reaction to it is that if the town of Louisville desires to put out pedestrian crossing signs in the vicinity of the Vienna Village, he is perfectly willing to let the town of Louisville do that. His only request is that we place that in writing. He'll place that in his file, and that when he has anyone that comes to him in the future and desires the same treatment because they have seen the signage out on Yadkinville Highway that the town has placed, then he is going to direct them to the town of Louisville for consideration for the same treatment from the town council.
Let me be sure I understood that, Hank. You just said that anybody in the county who makes a request would be referred to Louisville?
I wouldn't think in the county he would have anyone inside the town limits of Louisville that has a similar request. He does have another occupancy on Yadkinville Highway that has a very frequent request for the same signage inside the town of Louisville.
Oh, so anybody who makes a similar request inside of Louisville, he would direct them back to the council to make a determination.
Certainly if they were using the sign out on Yadkinville Highway at Vienna Village as a why not me?
Right.
Where do we have another situation that's similar to this in the town limits of Louisville that he's referring to?
He gets requests. Are you familiar with the Boy Scouts that meet down across from West Central Community Center?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
He gets regular requests from the parents of the Scouts that park across the street in the parking lot of West Central Community Center and walk across the street to where the Boy Scouts meet. He has regular requests for placement of pedestrian signs at that location.
That's the first I've heard of that.
Well, they go to him.
Well, it would have been nice if he'd have shared that with us about 6, 8 weeks ago or longer.
Council members, we have been discussing this for some time, and if you recall, the folks from Vienna Village did come before us, and again, in hindsight, we go back to previous council, and previous council heard the same request and made the determination not to do it. This council was asked if we would consider it, and that's where it is right now. I think that if at all possible, I think we should either say yes or no at this particular point and not continue to kind of keep this on our agenda and keep pushing it out.
I'll make a motion to go forward with providing in writing a letter to this gentleman on behalf of the town council to do what he's required and requested.
Well, I have a question just for clarity for me. Hank, did I understand you to say that the town would place the sign and maintain it?
Yes, we would purchase the materials, we would place the signs, and we would be responsible for its upkeep and maintenance.
Do you have an idea about cost for doing that?
No, I don't. Mr. Moser might.
You're muted.
Who's muted?
Ryan.
Oh.
We're going to start employing a lip reader here.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't have an idea, but I can find out and I can have that information for you next week.
I mean, Ryan, is it $50? Is it $200? It's certainly not $2,000.
I would think it probably would be between $80 to $100 a piece.
Okay.
And how many signs are we looking at?
Probably 2.
Okay.
Franklin?
Yeah, that estimate's way low, guys. When you go to price these things out and get them installed, and even with our labor and all, we're looking at least $1,000 here for 2 signs with the placards, the appropriate placards and stuff that go with it underneath. It's the original sign, the top sign, and the what is also required either in footage, you've got to put a placard below it. So you're talking four complete signs, and I'm sure these things are very expensive, a couple $100 a piece or more. So it's not 80 to $100, I'll tell you that now. Again, I've been buying things like this for industrial sites through the years. Okay.
Ms. Foster, would you be comfortable to withdraw your motion? And Mr. Moser, would you come back to us at our meeting next week with pricing?
Yes, sir.
Is that
Yes, I'm
acceptable?
comfortable with that, Mike. Absolutely. I withdraw the motion.
And Ryan, I'll be glad to give you the actual information for the particular signs that are needed, and be glad to go out and meet you one evening after work and show you where they need to be placed.
And to be clear for everybody, what Mr. Couch and I talked about, since they don't have a crosswalk, and we've discussed the crosswalks issue before, the method of placement that we're talking about is as you approach from either side, you will come upon a sign that warns you of pedestrians, so they will not be placed at any one location, indicating a place for people to cross, like a crosswalk.
That is correct.
Yep.
It's not a crosswalk.
Very
Be
good.
glad to help you through this.
To be moved to next week's agenda. I'm sorry, Dr. Sadler.
Yeah, so as we consider this, we can anticipate that it'll be double its cost, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's two directions, Kim. We got to put them coming and going.
No, I mean because of the Boy Scout issue.
No, well, we're not even considering the Boy Scouts right now. That's the first I've heard of it was tonight.
No, I understand, Fred, but what I thought I heard Hank say was that this Mr. Moser, whoever the fellow is going to direct those folks to the town to address their concern, which would require, well, I don't know how we would go about saying no.
I admit that we're opening up a can of worms as far as the town is concerned on state highways. I still believe that the official from the DOT is ducking his responsibilities that are just right out there in front of him to grasp an opportunity to do what's right for the safety of people. But at the same time, this issue can be easily solved if we will go ahead and put the signs up, and it may in fact save somebody's life. That's what makes me so mad, and I apologize for not being muted a minute ago.
Mr. Scriven.
Can we not let the person that wants the signs pay for the signs, since we've done all the work to get it approved?
I believe they have indicated a willingness to share in the cost, yes. So if I understand
the case, anyone going forward would have to share a portion of it, and that would keep the worms not all coming out at one time.
That's very true. That would become part of our policy.
Okay, so as a town, we can then create our own criteria. Hank, is that the understanding as to how we go about accepting or, approving the future ones that may come in?
I fully recommend the town establishing a criteria to use for this, because I do agree with Mr. Couch in that if you gave these types of requests, not just these signs, the signs that anybody requests, then it would be sign pollution potentially up and down the road. So I do recommend that we do have a certain amount of criteria to establish to judge these requests against.
And that would be, again, going back to our boards and committees, that would be a great function for them.
That is correct.
Keep in mind as well, the Public Safety Committee has already determined that they would not want to do this. But as they say, they serve at the pleasure of the council. So we can certainly make that request.
Right. Well, just to be clear, Mike, so staff coming up with a draft policy based upon what all has been discussed here and what the manager has found out per his report, and then the PSAC, Public Safety Advisory Committee, providing some advice and blessing, so to speak, on that. So at least plugging them in to that, I think, is important.
I mean, I think that would be the point. Okay, so let's review the bidding here real quickly. The council at this particular point, probably the first step is for staff to develop a draft policy, that policy to be given to the Public Safety Advisory Committee, that committee to understand that they can't reject that, but they can modify it because it's the desire of the council to have a policy. And then the third step in this would be for Ryan to go ahead and figure out the cost of doing this. Sounds to me like we have a little more to do than coming back to us next Thursday. So Hank, can you move that process ahead?
Yes, we can.
Ms. Welch, I think I saw your hand.
Yes. Also, if you would add to that since it is a safety issue, that we have a time limit for them to get back to us.
Very good.
Is that consensus of the board?
That was a restatement of what I thought where we were. Council members, can you give me a nod or a thumbs up? I don't think we have to have a vote on this. I'm seeing nods.
Hank,
I'm seeing
you're
nods.
asking
I'm seeing thumbs up.
Mike's consensus? Yes.
Yeah.
Right, that we make it ASAP accelerated.
Which will affect the whole Zoom and board and committee issue. So policy. They can't meet until we pass the policy.
It will happen when we're able to meet with the board. Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Very good.
Mayor, before we
Yes,
move
ma'am.
on, I think where I thought we were going with this was that we were going to look at some cost bases on this. We were going to analyze the cost bases and then get back in front of council with that information and then move forward. But we're doing the cost bases at the end, but we're going to go ahead and develop policy prior.
Yeah, council members, help me on that. My understanding was that we wanted to go ahead and develop the policy before we installed the signs.
Well, have we even agreed that that's what we're doing, I guess is my...
I thought what we were doing was what Melissa is saying, is that Ryan was going to do some homework, bring it back and get a quick little, hey, here's what I found out maybe in the manager's report next week. And then from there, a policy can be developed and we can take it to the next step of what Mike was saying.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Is that what you're saying, Melissa?
Yeah, and Ken, was that the direction you were going when you were inquiring regarding the cost basis of what this was going to look like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because if we found out next week, that would affect maybe the decision.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, if we're looking at $40,000 a sign, we may have a difference of opinion, a different outlook on this.
So Ryan, you'll come back to us with some costs then, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So it'll be on the agenda for costs. Mr. Franklin.
Yeah, I didn't mean to panic you about the cost. All Ryan's got to do is make a call to the place in Kernersville that he gave me the telephone number several years ago for these materials. And he can have that answered by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, basically. I mean, as far as cost is concerned, but it will not be $80 a sign. I can tell you that, because we need to go with a fluorescent yellow, if I can get that out, which is none on Yakinville Road from Renolda Road to the Yakin River that are fluorescent yellow. I can't say that word. I apologize. The green, yellow green sign, which is what we need there, because it will draw attention to a different situation in that area.
Well, I just found online there's a 24 by 24 reflective aluminum sign for $106. Now you're right, there will be money involved in the post and the stop. So
we'll find this out and report to you
when
exactly next week.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, if we need to hear any feedback from the people who brought this forward in terms of any costs that they're willing or able to support, as part of staff recommendation, I would be looking forward to hearing from that.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get the cost in line so that we know what we're talking about. You know, ladies and gentlemen, where I'm kind of feeling on this, and the question is, do we want to go ahead and install signs before we have a policy?
No.
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 So
No.
really, the price is part of the equation, but the policy development is probably the most important step.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Hank, you got your direction?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, counsel. We're down to administrative reports. Hank.
Okay, I do want to make a correction. Under manager's report, the Memorial Day service provided by American Legion, well, that has been canceled. The Memorial Day concert has been canceled. That is not totally true. We're anticipating it, but as everyone knows, we're waiting for the 22nd of May. Not anticipating that anything's going to be better, but there's a great possibility that a Memorial Day concert will have to be canceled because of the state of affairs. We will make a definite decision after we get more direction from the state of North Carolina and the current restrictions that we're under.
Very good. So
Okay.
we're the service is canceled, but the concert potentially could go on.
Right. And then the last thing I'm going to do talk about is both the town and the producer for the play this year are both recommending that we postpone the play at least till next year. The play, while it is in August, we will need to have had a contract approved like next week, and then the play producers have to have auditions, practices, and that involves people well in advance of August. The fear and the concern is that they would not be able to put this thing together and have it done under the current situation as they are. So we're recommending with them that we postpone this play 1 year, and that's what this report is on that. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Very good.
All right, that's it for my reports.
Very good. Mr. Houff, could you possibly have anything more for us?
Leading question.
Sir.
He does actually.
You do?
I do?
I don't know. I think you covered it back about 2 days ago, right?
Did you talk about the public hearing for next month on the budget? Public hearing?
Me?
Yes. Did we cover that?
Well, you'll be able to have your public hearing, but you'll hold the public hearing, and you'll probably have to recess or continue the vote on that for at least 24 hours following the meeting, following the public hearing.
Right. And for that, I believe I had a discussion with Joyce today that I thought you were a part of. The recommendation when we get to talk about the public hearing is we set the public hearing for the briefing so that we can have the requisite number of hours passed, and then we could take action at the regular meeting in June.
Right. Now.
Okay.
And we did, I think Joyce and I did talk about that this morning.
Okay.
Very good.
So I will just change the date when we get down to that point. I'll change the date to the briefing meeting date for the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
Ryan.
Franklin, I heard your pause in your voice.
Video again.
I'll run that by me again. We're gonna do the public hearing at a briefing.
Well, the reason
remember that you have to wait. Oh, go ahead.
You know, the
I
reason
was just going to update that again. Go ahead, Hank.
The reason we were proposing that is that you do have to allow for 24 hours to expire after you've given the chance for people to submit their written comments. If we do it on the regular meeting, it's not to say that we couldn't do that, but we would have to call a special call meeting after the regular meeting for the purpose of solely approving the council budget.
Well, we're living in some unusual times.
Yes, we are. Mr. Franklin, I agree with you. I would make this a normal practice.
Oh, I certainly wanted neither. I'm just talking about expediency in this state, in this circumstance.
Ms. Foster?
Question. So I don't have my budget calendar in front of me. I know I should sleep with it under my pillow, but I do not have it. So remind me, we've got tonight and then Monday of next week. And then after that, it was scheduled for
the briefing and then the regular meeting.
So the briefing was going to be possibly an opportunity to have further discussion about the budget.
Yes.
And the actual follow-up. So we're going to be getting rid of one particular opportunity to have additional budget discussion between briefing. Is that what you're saying?
You can still discuss it on that date.
Even though you're calling a public hearing that same day?
Is that not correct, Bo?
Yes, I mean, you'll be having discussion at whenever it takes place, and if there are any particular changes that need to be made to it during the course of that public hearing, that can be done. And as a matter of fact, someone may submit something the very next day that may have some impact on whether or not you wish to adopt the budget as presented. So you always have that opportunity for discussion before a vote. And when you have the next meeting, whether it's 24 hours later or 2 weeks later or whenever, during that time, there'll be an opportunity for additional discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. Ryan, we're back to you on sidewalk repair.
Okay, I am trying to get some numbers together it's been since 2015 the last time we had any shaving done as far as trip hazards go in downtown area. There's some areas that are so bad that the sidewalk's going to be replaced that shaving is not going to work. So I'm trying to get two sets of numbers together, some for repair and some for shaving. I hope to have those numbers ready for you all next week.
So, Mr. Moser, are you suggesting that you want us to take action on that next week?
Hank?
Yes.
I think he's talking about that if we have numbers and after we have competitive quotes for it, the intent is to have them for council consideration for approval so that we can get this work undertaken in this current fiscal year.
Okay. So we will have an item on our agenda for next week, which is basically to review numbers for this project. And you're expecting the council to take a vote to move forward on it?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan? We'll have some next week, I'm sure. Okay.
I do, Mayor, I do. So
yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. The goal would be for this to come out in this fiscal year, so prior to July.
That's correct.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Hunt, for that clarification. Very good. Okay, Stacy, I think we're back to planning.
Okay, you received by email, I believe, it's probably been a couple weeks ago now, a draft of the request for proposals for an upcoming project that we talked to you all about at the February planning meeting that we had, the retreat. So we wanted to come back to you guys, and we talked about it in April, about having before you a draft of the RFP in order for council to look and see exactly what we would be asking for, look to see what this project would entail. I hope you've had an opportunity to look through it. I have got feedback from Jean Marie and both the mayor. And I wanted to just kind of open it up for discussion. What this would entail would be an update, kind of a revamp. Again, we talked about it at the retreat for both the comprehensive plan that is due for an update, and then also for the Parks, Recreational, and Cultural Development Plan that is fairly outdated as well. We hope to kind of tag team it and to do it as one swift project. You'll see in the RFP there are different tasks associated with those. including both or all public involvement, different meetings, including the planning board, the Parks and Rec board, and all of those sorts of things. Gathering together a steering committee of different people from businesses, different residents that would be interested in serving on a steering committee of that kind in order to move this project forward. So if you have anything, any type of discussion that you would like to have about that, I'm happy to answer any questions or if you have any.
I think as we noted before, the comprehensive plan review is integral to our moving forward with the UDO revisions as well.
I just have a comment, Stacy. It looks great. I like seeing that there's defined timelines in there. I think that that's important, that we have defined those specific points of time. So good work.
Thank you.
And I'll reinforce that for the public and for all the council members to hear. Yeah, a lot of work went into this. I appreciate it. And my comments, I didn't share with council. There were just a lot of little things like making sure things were updated for public engagement in relation to what's happening with the COVID, tying it to Part F, ensuring that all social media mechanisms were plugged in, making sure the businesses are reflected as stakeholders, and tightening up the steering committee. It looked like the steering committee didn't meet until the very end. I think that probably it makes sense for it to meet earlier than like month 10. So I don't think you all need any of my little details, but at least wanted to share, and I've given it to Stacy. That's it.
One thing that I talked with Hank and some others about is kind of how this process would go. What we would like to do with council direction is to do an RFQ. What that is a request for qualifications. That would be across the board, just to kind of throw everything out there. It's a lot. It doesn't get in the weeds like the RFP does. What it is, it just kind of gives what we want to do, what this project is about, and then, okay, all these consulting firms, send us your qualifications. And then we would like to shortlist those, similar to how we did with the architect firm for the community center. And with that shortlist, then we send out the RFP, which is what you have. That's the very, very detailed document that you have been given. That is why we wanted council to be a part of that, because that's where it gets in the weeds. That's where it talks about those tasks, those meetings. Again, Jean Marie, that steering committee, who would be on it, that sort of thing, in order for us to actually choose that firm. So that's a little bit of the process that Hank and I have talked about going through. We feel that'll give us the best quality for this, major process that we want to go through, this major project that we want to accomplish. So in this again, this is just a draft. The nuts and bolts of it won't change. I know there are some grammar things. Bo's got me feedback, some great feedback on some grammar, some wording I know that needs to be changed, and with the mayor and Jean Marie's comments, I appreciate those. If anybody else has any comments, feel free to email me those. I will be finalizing it. And then again, sending it, of course, to Hank and others who would like to get, go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're hitting everything that we need to hit before we are good to start the process, hopefully. Yes.
I have 3 questions. You just referenced the RFQ going out. Is there a timeline that y'all have set before yourselves regarding that, when that would go out?
Councilman Hunt, personally, I think that this is highly stakeholder and community driven for the comprehensive plan and the recreation plan. I personally, and I don't know how council feels about this, under an optimal circumstance, we're talking about doing this after July, because this money is in the upcoming fiscal year. I would really like to see an opportunity where groups of people are especially able to engage in person, and I hope that time would be soon.
So Hank, but I was referring to the RFQ, which is just where you're putting it out for qualifications. Is that's what I was asking. So you would do
Oh,
the
yes. Well, yeah, you would want to figure out. You wouldn't want a whole lot of lag between the time you've got the proposals and the decision for who to do it and when you're going to start it, of course. So We'll do that when it makes good sense in the timing of things for when to put the RFQ out. If we look at it and backdate all of the processes and it's next week, then we'll work towards that end. But that's where we're going right now.
Okay, and then how many companies do you guys typically, Stacy had mentioned that you narrow it down to, after you send out the RFQ, then it's kind of narrowed down. How many companies are typically considered for that short list?
Stacy, you want to speak to that?
I would think at minimum three. Three is generally a good number. The short list would be, I would think, three of the top firms, our top three picks. So overall, I believe we would be happy with any of those. It's just the RFP, the actual proposal, where they come back to us with pricing. They come back to us with any added benefit that they may be able to give us in between those three for us to make the final decision. But if three is a good number, we could go with that. If 2 or 4 or 5, whatever. Three's kind of the general number, I think, that most would go with.
But I think, though, Ms. Hunt, a lot of that's going to be driven by the caliber and the quality of the respondents to the RFQ. I mean, we could have 4 that are awesome, or we could have only 2 that we're happy with. So we just have to see what the response rate is to the RFQ, and then see what the attrition is for it and how many people are left standing after we're finished evaluating the RFQs.
And Hank, is that something that council takes a look at? I mean, this is my first RFQ process when it comes to town council. Is that something that we have a look at that particular smaller document, or we are just looking at this RFP?
Traditionally, this is a more of a staff level with possibly council representation.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Very good. Stacy, you got a subdivision rezoning to talk about.
Yes, this kind of goes along with what we've been talking about meeting virtually and remotely and everything. This subdivision is one that has been hanging out. It requires a public hearing. They have already been to the planning board. They were able to go through them before everything kind of went belly up. So they are just waiting on a public hearing to get approval or denial for their subdivision to move forward before the town council. So I guess what we can do is we can decide to set a public hearing for this, keeping in mind that at a public hearing like Bo has been talking about, you have to allow the 24 hours for written comment. I guess it would be up to council whether or not how that was handled as far as the final decision, when that would be made. Would it be, the following month, the following regular meeting, or how would that go? Bo, do you have a suggestion on that? You're muted.
I think that's going to be at council's discretion. On that, you could, as I said before, and I don't want to go over it too much again, council could recess their meeting until the following day or 2 days out, and that would be probably, that would allow the 24-hour period to elapse, and then you could come back. Since we're going to be meeting remotely anyway, if we're not meeting remotely, then you go ahead and vote on it that night. So if we end up our meeting remotely, everybody's home in the evening, we could probably get this knocked out in a relatively short period of time after a public hearing has already pretty much fleshed it out, I would think.
So I guess mainly what we're looking for tonight is some direction on if you do want Joyce to prepare a resolution to set a public hearing. We could do that next week. For a possible June public hearing, whatever, however council feels to move forward with that. But that's where that subdivision lies. It requires a public hearing now before council to rezone property.
Yeah.
I think since this has been languishing for a while, I think we need to go ahead and move it forward. So council, are you okay for setting a public hearing next week? I say nods.
Muted,
Okay.
Joyce.
Very good.
And the
What,
public hearing,
I'm sorry, what date?
Yeah.
Well, we would set a public hearing next week, and I guess the public hearing, do we want to follow the same procedure and have the public hearing at our briefing, followed up by the next Thursday, or do you just want to have a public hearing at our next meeting, regular meeting, and then we can have a specially called meeting to deal with the continuation of the public hearing?
so in June, we've got the briefing, the budget.
Yes.
And
If you're
any other
gonna-
things that are going to be on the
Yes.
agenda for
If you're
June.
going to do that public hearing on the subdivision the way the mayor just proposed, I would do the public hearing on the budget the same way, and then have 2 items on that special call meeting.
Okay, so you're not going to do it on the briefing. I'm just trying to clarify dates so I know what I'm bringing back to you.
Yeah, I would think, and I agree with Mr. Franklin, these are extraordinary times, but as a precedent, I just hate to do public hearings on briefing nights. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we were to look then at we'll consider for our June meeting, not our briefing, public hearings on the budget and public hearings on the subdivision plan. And then following that, we can go ahead and advance notice that we will have a special meeting 24 hours or 48 hours following that to conclude the public hearings and vote on both those proposals.
Yep.
Okay,
That
would be on a Friday, the following Friday night.
That's what I was getting ready to mention. We'd be careful of that 24 hours. If we do it, let's do it 72 or whatever to get us to Monday or something. I'm
I
not
think
sure.
that's fine.
Or-
So
I
let's
think
let's
24
go-
hours is the minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20, yeah. And
we
as
just
it
have-
turns out, just for more specific information, if you did not get to that point where you completed your public hearing and it was 9:30, then it would be 9:30 the next night that you would have to bring that forward. So just pointing
So
that
we're
out.
going to set public hearings for both those items for our for our regular council meeting in June.
Okay, and then I don't have my calendar, but it would probably be the 15th. I think June 15th,
It
is that
would be the
Monday?
15th. Monday is the 15th following.
The
Right.
11th is the regular date for the regular council
Regular
meeting.
meeting, so it'll be Monday
June
the 15th to come back to it.
Yes.
Maybe we can decide on the special meeting date next week. Will it be Monday, will it be Tuesday, or whatever the following week? But obviously 9:30 on a Friday night probably is not a good time to set the vote,
Right.
especially for a budget, whether it be, much less a subdivision.
Okay, we're all good with that?
Okay,
Good.
so you'll decide the date next week for the following meeting.
No, ma'am. We
Right.
will set the public hearing for both of those items for our June council meeting.
I understand, but then someone said
And then,
next week you will decide on the date for when you will have your follow-up meeting, and I was
the continuation, yes,
confirming
ma'am.
that.
Yeah,
That's
Special
correct.
call. Mhm.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Very good. Ms. Walker, we're down to you on Historic Resources Commission.
Yes, I placed that information in everyone's packet so they can read through all of that. It took us from the very beginning when the folks in planning downtown offered this to the town, and it takes us up to where we are today. So it's there for everyone's. This was just a follow-up, I believe, to Melissa's question. And since everybody was basically new, I asked the Michelle McCullough if she would just write up something so everyone would have it in hand to refer to.
Very good. Any questions for Ms. Walker? Okay. We are now down to taking a look at our agenda for next week's meeting. Pam, of course, in our consent agenda. We don't have any surprises in our financial reports, except I think you indicated that we were looking at some concerns about sales tax revenue.
That's correct. I am predicting a small decrease in what we had budgeted, but that hasn't panned out just yet. It should be reflected in the next couple of months of collections.
Very good. So we will add to public hearings, a public hearing on the budget, setting the date, and a public hearing on the subdivision, setting the date. Under new business, let's see. We will also take up the Vienna Village signage that we talked about, and we will take up further discussion on sidewalk repairs that Mr. Moser will come back with us, I believe, with some numbers to look at. Were there any other additions to the agenda, Ms. Walker, that we talked about during this meeting?
Mike, we
Yes,
talked
ma'am.
about the part 2 of the policy.
Thank you very much.
We might have some feedback on that next week.
Okay, great. So as a discussion item, we will add a discussion on the board and committee remote policy. Okay, anything else?
Remind me of what we decided on the face masks.
The face mask went down the toilet.
Probably what a 35-cent face mask should do.
So we're going to flush them out.
Better the toilet than the
Yeah,
parking lot.
we flushed that one out pretty good, Jane. Yeah. Very good. Anything else for the agenda?
I've got a question before we proceed on, okay? We were
Yes, sir.
going to talk about tax collection somewhere. Was that going to be on next week's agenda or tonight's agenda?
Tonight, I thought.
That's what I thought too, and we haven't talked about tax collection yet.
Let's see.
And that's very important.
But it's showing here on the tentative agenda.
Yeah, we will have on our agenda, it's already listed for our agenda for next week, is both orders to collect the taxes for the 2020 taxes and the 2019.
I'm working off of notes here. I just want to make sure we weren't missing it for tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Both those were on there for next week in addition to the 4 other items that we're going to be talking about.
I'm good.
Ladies and gentlemen watching at home, if we possibly confused you any more than we are confused others. Trust me, we will be straight next week. Mrs. Walker.
Yeah, Jane asked the question about face masks, and the last note I had was to send discussion back to PSAC, but you don't want that?
You're not up to
No, ma'am. Yeah, you hear that noise in the background?
Crickets. That's all I need. Thank you.
That's all you needed. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are there any other additions to the agenda? If not, we'll move approval. Need a motion. Mr. Smitherman makes a motion to approve the agenda for next week with those additions.
Yes,
And
sir.
Ms. Hunt makes a second. Any further discussion? Very good. For the vote, Mr. Smitherman?
Aye.
Dr. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Franklin?
Aye.
Ms. Hunt?
Aye.
Ms. Welch?
Aye.
Very good. The mayor makes it unanimous. So that is our agenda for next week. Council members, is there anything that we would like to discuss at this current meeting before we have a little adjournment for the budget? I'll remind you that the clock on the wall in my background, it is not 20 minutes till 4, it is 8:20.
Yeah, yeah, sorry guys. So I'll make this quick because I had committed to Hank and Joyce and Stacy to just give you guys a quick update. So the board and committee project, we just know that we've been meeting. We've met a couple of times. The policy came out of that. An email has gone out. More reaching out has occurred. A conversation with Jeannie has happened relative to getting some survey instruments in place. So more to come. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Foster, for shepherding this through. It's an important project. Anything else, council members, you wish to discuss before we adjourn this meeting?
I had a question about the bulky items pickup. I know it was canceled. I'm just wondering, has it been, will it be rescheduled?
Ryan, if you know something more than I do.
Yeah, I don't know anymore until this COVID-19 goes by. That's what's holding us up. Hopefully we'll have one it possibly may be in the fall, but just waiting for Waste Management to give us the word.
Yeah, I was wondering why the COVID-19 would have any impact on bulky items. I mean, they're picking up regular garbage, and they wouldn't be
Well, I guess
making, it wouldn't be contact.
There's a lot more manual labor involved with the bulky, having to touch the materials than there are dumping the garbage cans and the recycling cans.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, Ken, there was something that just came out from Waste Management talking about they're going to not pick up garbage if people are not actually putting their garbage in a bag. They're concerned about the fomite, the fear of the touching things that might be contaminated.
Council members, anything else? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to adjourn this meeting, and we will reconvene here in about 10 minutes for our scheduled budget meeting, when we'll hopefully work through the rest of our budget. Okay, let's see, I am lost. Did we have a vote to adjourn the meeting?
We're going to recess it? Or are we going to?
No, this is
separate
adjourning
meeting.
our council meeting, and then we'll adjourn our budget meeting, or we'll convene our budget meeting. Dr. Sadler.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Mr. Smitherman makes the motion. Looks like Dr. Sadler makes the second. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Smitherman, to adjourn the meeting.
Aye.
Dr. Sadler,
Aye.
Ms. Foster,
Aye.
Mr. Franklin,
Aye.
Ms. Hunt,
Aye.
Ms. Welch.
Aye.
Very good. That's unanimous. We are adjourned, and we'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for your patience. We hate to pull you away from the final episode and finale of Survivor, but we're ready to get into a very exciting budget meeting. Calling to order, council members present are Ms. Welch, Mr. Franklin, Ms. Foster, Mr. Smitherman, Ms. Hunt, and Mr. Horn, all present. Staff members present are Mrs. Walker, Ms. Tolbert, Mr. Perkins, Ms. Orell, and Mr. Houth, and I believe Mr. Moser will be joining us shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the agenda we have, I think if I'm correct, Mr. Manager, number 2, we have completed all the way through to H. Is that correct?
I have it that we're picking up planning, and then we'll be jumping back to public safety. We had finished community policing last time we met.
Very good. So, okay, we're going to come back to, we'll do planning and then come back to public safety. Thank you.
Is that correct, Pam? Did I have that correct?
No, we finished public safety last time.
Okay.
Okay.
It's public works that goes after.
Yeah, we'll go to
planning.
public works.
All right, public works.
Okay, very good. Any changes or additions to our budget meeting? Okay. With that, we'll entertain a motion to approve the budget agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Welch makes the motion, Mr. Smitherman makes the second. Any further discussion? Very good. Those voting are Mr. Smitherman.
Aye.
You've all changed seats on me. Ms. Hunt,
Aye.
Mr. Sadler,
Aye.
Ms. Welch,
Aye.
Ms. Foster,
Aye.
Mr. Franklin.
Aye for the second separate meeting of the night.
Very good. And I vote aye as well. That's unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on, I just want to take a moment to see if anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to discuss about our first 2 meetings on the budget.
No, other than to say thank you to Pam and Hank for responding to the questions that I had, and for creating the charts, the spreadsheets that were created. I think they were helpful. I had one question regarding it still appears that we pay a lot for health coverage, comparatively speaking. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to bring that cost down. I don't know if if the town's part of a group or just what could be done to potentially lower that cost? I think there was only one other town close in size to Louisville in that spreadsheet.
I'll take a stab at that and then let Miss Orrell correct me when I cross over the wrong direction. Our premiums are based not on our group history, but by sort of a regional approach because of our group size being what it is and being so small. But it does take into account the average age of the group. So we are age-based and we are regional based. So our group is somewhat older, and that may explain the cost differential that you see in our premiums versus other towns.
There's probably some experience in there too. I don't know if you had claims.
Well, it's not in the town of Louisville's experience.
It's not?
Not looked at that way.
Oh, okay.
Tim, you want to just give us a nutshell of how we go through and select our plans?
Yeah, I think it's about every October. Snow Benefits, our insurance broker, they go out for basically bids. They gather quotes from companies that are willing to bid on our plan, and normally that is confined to Blue Cross and United Healthcare. I think Cigna might have been on the survey that we prepared for Dr. Sadler, but they do not touch towns our size. We're too small for them. So, and we do look at many different plans, many different deductibles, deductible plans, and that type thing, and just try to come up with the best plan that we think suits our employees and try to balance it with the cost. But to go back to what Hank said, since we are fewer than 15 employees, our health history does not come into play in setting our rates. The biggest factor really is the age of our population here of our staff. So it goes into setting the rates.
Very good. Thank you, Pam. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're moving on. Pam, are you leading us?
No, that'd be Hank.
Okay. Mr. Manager.
Okay, the next budget department that we've got, you'll find is planning. It's on page 22 of your books. Everyone's there. And for that, for the only thing that we call out as being possibly interesting to this group and something that we want to make note of is that, like general government, we do have an attorney's cost in this. This is work that we do with Bo. This is segregated, and he keeps track of these costs differently from planning to general government. So his line item for the cost of, not his line item, but the cost of legal is $40,000. And then under contract services, we also have the city of Winston-Salem for zoning services. We pay $15,000 a year is an estimated cost of that. That's our budget for it. Benchmark code enforcement, which we utilize for basically nuisance yards, tall grass, is at $5,000. And then lastly, as we talked about earlier when we talked about the RFP, we do have a placeholder of $90,000 in the planning budget for the comprehensive plan update. Now, this is only an estimate and not based, or should be considered what the actual cost of this work shall be when we get there. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hank, you're still only, let's see, tell us about the positions that's included in this, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. This does include one position, and this is our town planner, Stacy Tolbert.
Okay. Very good. Any questions on planning? Ms. Foster. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Stacy, Hank, Pam, I forecast just briefly that I at least wanted to understand what consideration was given to the request that the planning board had made back in November of 2018, with regard to consulting fees, considering bringing some of the enforcement in-house, obviously the consultation for comprehensive planning, et cetera. So
right.
just a brief comment about that, because as I said to you all individually, I think this is important for the queue up potentially even for next year for staffing.
Right. What we went into this time with it, Ms. Foster, is there was consideration to what we talked about early on with revenues, this being a tough year that we're anticipated coming up. We did investigate and consider additional employment for the town of Louisville. That was in public works. We made the decision at that point to cut that back because we felt like with the general workload in public works that, and what we had before us economically, that it probably wasn't in the cards and we could put that off for future consideration. In regards to your question about the planning department, a lot of the same consideration goes into it when we consider what goes into each of the departments. For planning, we considered the workload coming up, the current economy, the longstanding tradition of the town to look at contract work first in favor of and before looking at adding FTE to the employment base. And I would probably say, I had a talk with Stacy about this today. I would probably say that if you looked at it, we are doing a lot of what was talked about and addressed in 2018 by use of contract work. We are having the comprehensive plan looked at from outside assistance. We had our audit that goes to, I guess, our postmortem on what our UDO needs to be for the future. And then we have our comprehensive plan work. And then obviously we will have future work that will require consultation in private entities in the future for the, I guess, whatever comes as changes to our UDO in the future. Stacy, do you have anything to add? Okay, she's shaking her head no.
See that, the muted. So question for you, and Stacey, you may want to speak to this. So one of the things that came up for purposes of history briefly for the council is back in 2018, the planning board had a joint meeting with council. And at that time, there was a lot of communication back and forth. And bottom line is council said, tell us what you need. Well, we shared a pretty lengthy document about what we perceived we needed from a planning perspective. Part of that was a UDO audit, which you experienced tonight with Chad. But also we were looking at the fact that we outsource, looks like, what are you saying? 15,000 for zoning and 5K for benchmark. So that's a $20,000 outsource for enforcement. So what we were wondering about is some synergy that could be gained by bringing some of that in. And maybe now is not the right time. And I know we're talking about this year's budget, but again, this is old request of planning board. I wanted this council to at least hear of that. And maybe it makes sense given everything happening with COVID to forward that for next year. But I felt the need to at least bring it up.
Yes, Ms. Foster, I certainly agree that this conversation needs to happen. Generally, we have this conversation at council level. Earlier this year, we had one in February, and I think everybody will recall at that time, I said that I rely a lot on that planning session early in the year as guidance to help figure out what council priorities are as we put together the operating budget. So if it's not in the cards this year, I certainly would continue to support future conversations about the direction for the planning department and the need for additional resources as we move into the upcoming fiscal year, not the one we're coming into, but the one following. That would guess would be 21-22.
Any other questions on planning? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the planning budget.
Move approval.
Dr. Sadler makes the motion. Ms. Foster makes the second. Any further discussion? Very good. Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Mr. Franklin.
Hey.
Ms. Welch.
Aye.
Dr. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Smithman.
Aye.
Good. Mayor votes aye as well. That's unanimous. Public Works.
Okay. Public Works will be found on page 26. In Public Works, we have 3 positions. We have a Public Works Director and 2 maintenance technicians. That constitutes the employment within that department. For Public Works, and I'm going to certainly let Ryan chime in for discussions on this as well. I'll go through it briefly, and I'm sure we'll have discussions on these items. The first we'll point out is that we do have a new Public Works vehicle in the budget for it, and I guess it's not solely a Public Works vehicle. This is the Mountaineer replacement. So this is in Public Works, but it is a vehicle that crosses departmental lines a lot of times. It's one that we end up taking out of town, whether or not we're hauling town council people to meetings or we're going and making supply runs. But that's the vehicle that we're running with. We have a budget figure for planning purposes for $50,000. Moving next, we'll point out that we do have contracted services, yards by us.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, if I could address that. That's a brand new vehicle.
Yes, it is.
And I do have concerns about purchasing a brand new vehicle for the town. Have you priced it out, say a vehicle with 50,000 miles or less? You know, a brand new vehicle really concerns me.
Well, if we want to go ahead and deal with the vehicle now, Ryan, what we talked about, Ms. Welch, is looking off state contract. So they are public contracts that are negotiated from the state of North Carolina, hopefully you get the best price possible. We don't know exactly what vehicle will be available under state contract in the upcoming year. So like we've said before, this is a planning document and a planning number. We don't anticipate necessarily that we will spend $50,000, but this is not only for the vehicle, but it is for accessories and related items that go onto the vehicle, like the strobe lights and the warning lights. Ryan, you got anything else that needs to be added to it?
Strobe lights and warning lights are really all that need to be added, other than if it doesn't have a towing hitch, we'll need a tow hitch.
Right. So we're not saying that we'll necessarily spend $50,000, but we don't want to end up not putting enough in the budget.
Right. Will you be pricing out other vehicles that are comparable, that are not brand new vehicles?
We had not contemplated looking at used vehicles.
How many miles are on the old vehicle?
I should have that. I believe it's 120,000.
I've got it. It's 128,000.
Okay.
What are you going to do with that vehicle?
That's what I was hoping.
We could end up on an auction. With that vehicle for the Mountaineer, we do believe that it does need to be replaced. We've run into lots of maintenance issues and repairs, and keeping that roadworthy has become quite expensive in the last, I'd say, year to 6 months to a year.
Who are we using for service?
What's that, sir?
So who are we using for service currently?
Ryan?
Parkway Ford as of right now.
And how much have we spent on repair work in the last 6 months to a year?
Pam,
do you have this?
that?
I would have to look that up and get back to you, Melissa.
I will mention this, that at one point, I believe it was a year or so ago, we had to buy a part that wasn't available, and we had to buy it from the junkyard to fix the vehicle. The back glass on that vehicle, it's so hard to close it. You feel like you almost are going to break the back hatch when you have to close it.
Ryan, what year is that vehicle?
It's a 2000.
2000, so it's 19 years old?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
20 years old.
Yeah, 20 years old. Mr. Smithman.
I would just like to make a comment that to those who aren't familiar with state contract, I have to deal with it a lot in my business when I'm selling to governmental agencies. what it does, it simplifies and reduces the work that the towns and cities have to do because the state takes it upon themselves to go get the best prices on everything. It makes it much simpler. And if we have them research and do, we're basically reworking everything that the state has already done.
But I think that you're talking about new vehicles, though. I still question if a used vehicle would still save us money, a low mileage used vehicle.
I understand what you're saying, but in my opinion, for what we're looking for, it can be shown that the vehicle we have now, they've had for 20 years. It's not something that they want to flip like an individual would do. And it's better that they go new so that they would have new warranty. They could get extended warranty if it was made known, but a lot of times on used vehicles, you're not given warranties like you are on new.
May I speak? May I speak?
Yes, sir.
So I've done a little bit of pricing. If we were to go with a Chevrolet Tahoe, we could get it for roughly $38,000. And I just did some research online. If you were a personal, if you had to go out, if any of you all had to go out and buy it right now, the MSRP is starting at $49,000. So that's a savings of almost $11,000 if we bought it through government contract.
I think generally speaking, in fact, most municipalities are purchasing through government contract because of obviously the price breaks that you get because the state's buying in volume and they're negotiating in volume. Jane, I understand what you're saying. I think you got 20 years on a vehicle. That's, if you think you're going to buy a vehicle 4, 5, 6 years old, you may be just asking for more trouble down the road. Whereas a new vehicle, we're going to drive it for another 20 years. So I kind of would look to the public works manager and the manager for their recommendations because they've got to live in these vehicles every day.
Right. I think of just, having personal experience with cars as well. Toyota and Honda, I feel, are such a reliable product too. Are you only looking at Ford or Chevys and U.S. made cars?
There's only a certain amount of vehicles that are available through government contracts. Chevrolet Tahoe, Ford Expedition, let's see, Nissan Armada, and Jeep Cherokee.
Hey, Ryan.
I think that, well, I'm sorry, but I think that Mountaineer was bought used, by the way.
Possibly so.
So you spoke a little bit in regards to the uses of the vehicle. Can you kind of give me a little bit more information as to why it would be a multi-seat, versus like a truck? Or, I mean, what is, you had mentioned, you had alluded to, you needed a hitch on it, that kind of thing. What's its primary use?
Well, as you know, there's only 2 public works employees right now. If David's using the truck to haul stuff, or if I'm using the truck to haul stuff, the other vehicle may need to haul or tow the trailers that we have. It will need to be off-road because there's multiple times where I have to go to job sites or David has to go to job sites and take it off-road, and I'd hate for us to damage something or get stuck.
But why not another truck, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with that, versus I heard Hank mention that town council travels in it and this and that. But couldn't we just drive our own vehicles and get reimbursed if we needed to do such, and we just get a 2-seater truck or a 3-seater truck or something?
David uses that vehicle. He goes and does the shopping for the town, and I guess you'd have to be on a sunny day to carry the stuff in a truck.
I'll chime in a moment. If you had had this budget request in here for $50,000 for a pickup truck, I might be a little bit more acceptable or understandable, if you will. But for a SUV, I just don't see that. And if you're claiming a lot of maintenance cost on a 120,000 mile vehicle, even if it's 20 years old, if you're carrying it to Parkway Ford, you're carrying it to the wrong place. You need to be carrying it about a quarter mile down the street inside of the town of Louisville, because I've got a 94 model truck that's got over 200,000 miles that is being maintained by a facility in Louisville at a very reasonable cost every time I need to have something done, whether it be 4-wheel drive, service, or whatever. So again, I thought this was going to be for the pickup truck. I'm not so sure that this is the vehicle that would need to be replaced if it was. We've got a pickup truck that is not 4-wheel drive currently, and for whatever reason, we got a snow blade on the front of it, and I can't imagine pushing snow with a 2-wheel drive vehicle. I just don't understand the reasoning behind this request.
To speak to your concern about, and I understand using a local garage. The last time that we had the vehicle serviced, I actually went to, and I can't think of the name of the shop down here beside the Liberty, and I had them price what items we had fixed on the vehicle, and surprisingly, it was very comparable to the Parkway Ford. But I do agree with you that we could use local services to fix our vehicles.
Well, if you had it priced at the shop beside the Liberty, you went the wrong direction from Town Hall.
Okay.
We'll deal with service. Mr. Franklin, your point is well taken. The issue on the table, ladies and gentlemen, is do we want to accept the staff's recommendation for a new SUV that they believe they need for the uses they have, or do we want to make a counter recommendation and tell them what they should buy?
My recommendation would be for a pickup truck for town use.
Ms. Walker, I'm sorry.
Just, I was going to try to answer the question that Melissa had before when she asked about carrying staff members, council members, etc. But when we do go to faraway places and go to faraway meetings, it's actually more expeditious for many of us to ride together, which we have done in the past. Because remember, Hank, when the heat went out in February, when we were in the green vehicle, in the Mountaineer, and we had to come back and get your vehicle to use, to take with us. So it is used not just for some of that work, but we do use it to go to other meetings and other things like that occasionally.
Thank you.
How long, what's the life expectancy on the vehicle once you purchase it? Do you have an idea? I know how long we didn't buy this car. I'm pretty sure the Mountaineer was not bought in 2000. I'm pretty sure I'm recalling accurately that it was bought used, but it does have a number of years of usage on it. So the question I'm getting to is, how many years would you anticipate you would have this vehicle once purchased?
Based on the type of use we've seen, at least in the 8 years I've been here, I think it would last a very long time.
Yeah. So amortized over, just say 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cost per year on something like that? I hear a calculator.
With a keyboard.
Bunch of numbers.
I mean, if you're purchasing a $50,000 vehicle over 15 years, that would be $3,300 per year.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we'll touch 50.
No, because what Ryan just said a minute ago was you're talking about $38,000, most likely, thereabouts.
Yes. And I have not priced the strobe lights, but I would dare say that they would be no more than $2,000 or $3,000. They are expensive. So we're looking at low 40s.
So Ryan, and I'm kind of going back and forth on the SUV versus the truck deal. Would you get more use out of a truck?
Well,
I mean, where you could put, where you could affix stuff to it and pull stuff and put stuff, and maybe you put a camper shell on the back of it to throw stuff in. And but I do hear y'all saying that multiple people need to ride in a vehicle. I'm just, you know, was that
It's the
considered?
versatility of the sport utility that we're after on this one.
I'm sorry, Hank.
It's the versatility, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to clarify. Okay, thank you.
And for clarification, Ryan,
Yes, ma'am.
does the state offer used cars, or are we just considering the
Truthfully, I don't know that, ma'am. I could look into that, but I don't know that.
You can get used vehicles through the state of North Carolina, generally through Motor Pool and the Department of Corrections.
They usually will.
But they have been run to death. Yeah.
Folks, let me get back to the question. We're spending a lot of time on this. I don't want to say it's a minor expenditure. It is a major expenditure, but we have a recommendation from the Public Works Director and the Town Manager that this is the vehicle that they need. They provided some reasoning for that. I believe we either need to accept that or we need to make our own decision about what they should go buy. Mr. Smitherman.
I would like to make the offer that we accept what they say, but flag it so that when they are about to do it, they let us know about how much we're looking at totally.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir, that's a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Dr. Sadler makes a second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to add that they do at least look into the used ones, what's available, if there's a low mileage, and compare the cost.
You mean used through the state system, Jane, or used in general?
Well, it sounds like the state system makes a considerable difference in price. Would like to, actually, I guess, to have both, just to see what they could find out, you know, without the state system, but also the state system, to look into, you know, give us some idea of what a used one would look like and in and out of the state system.
Is that an amendment to the original?
Yes.
So is this
with that, then, Dr. Sadler, would you accept that amendment to your second?
So the amendment is to look into the possibility of purchasing a used vehicle, comparable used vehicle, say a year-old car with under 10,000 miles or something like that.
From the public.
From the public, because I think you know, once the old adage is once it's off the lot, you know, it loses about 25% of its value anyway.
Right.
And if you go ahead.
I can tell you without even looking at that, you're not going to find a public sector used contract vehicle that's going to be that low mileage.
Oh no,
yeah,
I agree. On public sector cars, they're going to be well used. I mean, I don't think that. I think you're pretty much going to be looking in the you know, private used car sector, and you know. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we understand the point, though.
Mm-hmm. I'm coming from the experience of mainly buying used cars and having a lot of luck with that, especially when you consider the 25% that automatically you lose with a new vehicle. And the cars just last longer now, and I would like to include that.
I agree with you, except for the car I currently drive. I hadn't bought a new car in years. Mm-hmm. Everything we've driven, my kids, my wife, all of them have been cars that are 1, 2, 3 years old, something like that. So I don't disagree. You know, it's just a matter of them figuring out where to look and what they're looking for specifically. I have a cousin that's in the used car business. I almost just was reluctant to mention this, you know, because he is a relative. But, you know, we buy and sell cars all the time that are used, of the kind, Tahoes. Every car you mentioned can be bought a year old with under 10,000 miles. probably less money than you're talking about.
Understood.
So let's kind of advance this discussion if we could. Dr. Sadler, it sounds like the amended motion for your second consideration is that we also look at a vehicle that's a year old and less than 10,000 miles, as well as what is available through the state system.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. If we're going to look used, we wouldn't go any older than that.
Yeah. Mr. Smithman, will you accept that as amendment to your motion?
Yes, sir, I will.
Very good. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to clarify exactly what we're getting ready to vote on. Is it just the vehicle, not the whole public works?
Yes.
It's just the vehicle. We've had just the vehicle, yes.
I want to make sure I understood what we're getting ready to vote on.
Right. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Roll call, Ms. Welch.
Approve.
Mr. Franklin.
Nay.
I'm sorry?
Nay.
Nay.
No.
Okay.
As in no.
Ms. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Smithman. David, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Sadler.
Aye.
I believe I started with Mrs. Welch. You guys are all spread all over the screen now, so it's hard to keep up with you. Mayor votes yay on this one. So it is a 6-1 with Mr. Franklin and the negative. And I hate to say it, it's not really the negative, in the minority. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Well, no.
And it's a no vote, yes. Okay, very good. Anything else in planning? I'm sorry, anything else in public works?
Yes, we've got a couple of things here in Public Works. As I was going to continue with that one, in contracted services, we do have a contract for mowing of municipal grounds, and that's at $41,400. That is a single contract, and the lowest responsible bidder was our current contractor at Yards by Us. I think I'm a little bit confused, and Ryan and Pam, please correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I know I talked to the mayor a little bit about this. In the current fiscal year, we have one contractor, Yards by Us. They do both the mowing and the maintenance of plant beds, with the exception of the perennial gardens. What we've been working with this year, and I'm confident that while if you add these costs up, we are going to pay a premium, not necessarily because of what we're doing, but because it's been about 4 years since we've looked at the pricing. What we have done this year, and I think it's a good move that we'll explain to you, is that Yards by Us will not be responsible under this contract for plant beds maintenance. They are just going to mow the grass. What we have done is to segregate these duties, and we've got another contractor in another department, and that is Ecologic out of Winston-Salem. That is the fella in the company that maintains our perennial garden, which with much success with the beautification committee. We've got his organization is set to take over maintenance and upkeep of all the plant beds in the perennial gardens and to do all of the fine landscaping. In addition to this contract, we've added maintenance and upkeep of all of the trees on Shallowford Road, which had not been previously done, but that's in a different department. Kind of explaining to you the segregation of work that we've gotten into. So this contract by Yards by Us is different in the standpoint that they cut grass, and that's all they're going to be cutting grass for doing for the town. We have changed a little bit. The finer work that has been done in the past by this group is now going to be done by someone in an organization that is a certified horticulturist and has already done a few years of work with the town and also has done all the tree planting on Shallowford Road. All right. And lastly, I'll point out that we have Christmas tree pickup and disposal at $4,500.
Ms. Foster.
Thank you. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this one, but I will say, I hear everything you're saying. I love the direction you guys are heading, but I'm wondering about the standards. So hang with me here. If we're paying for people to mow the lawn or the grass, then they're coming every so often, depending upon either their schedule or the height standards that we set for grass, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking through, and I've actually seen on occasion, specifically talking about Jack Warren Park, where it's mowed pretty short. And I guess I'm wondering about, for your consideration as a staff going forward, that the trends are, if you let the grass grow higher, number one, you've got a healthier product.
I understand.
Okay, and I'm just thinking through, if you're letting it grow a little bit higher, then you don't need the folks to come in as often. So again, I don't want to micromanage, but I'm just wondering in terms of how often we look at standards as opposed to just saying, whoops, let's just get these guys back to do what they do. So
Sometimes if the grass doesn't need it, if it's not a growing season, the grass hasn't done anything, and again, not to get into the nitty-gritty details, we don't mow grass for the sake of mowing grass, and we do look at the conditions of the soil and the turf. And there's a lot more to even this part of the budget, the contract, than just mowing the grass.
Understood. I just, you hear my intent.
Yes, I do. I
Thank
understand.
you. No, thanks.
Okay, question, please. I think it's to Hank. Under the maintenance of overgrown and unkept lots, does our staff take care of those lots?
No, ma'am. We have a contract. I think it's the same group that does the grass mowing is also doing these contract work as well. That's on a piecemeal basis based on complaint-driven accounts. And I think we talked about a little bit with enforcement of that through planning.
And just a question on how many unkept lots do we have normally?
Lots.
Or like how many did we have last year? There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. A lot of them are
Most of them are
flyers.
repeat offenders.
Yep.
I'm sorry, are repeat offenders?
Yes.
Okay. And do we charge them for having to mow their property?
They do receive bills, and we are set up with the ability that if they do not pay the bills, we can create grass liens, is what they're called for in short. Those liens, if we create them, would remain in place until the property is put up for sale, and then they have to be settled and the town has to be paid when the property changes hands.
Thank you.
I got a hopefully an easy question. How many different departments does Yards by Us show up in this budget?
Well, they're going to be in the MSD, and they're going to be in the Public Works Department, and then that's it. Public Works is going to handle, yes, Pam?
And Powell Bill, in the Powell Bill.
Oh, Powell Bill, yeah, because they're doing rights of way.
All right, that's the reason I was. My biggest question and my note that I've got written here is, what does constitute municipal grounds? I know that we entered into a contract years ago, or not a contract, but an agreement with DOT about the interchange of Williams Road and 421 to keep that beautified because they come in and underbrushed it for free.
Yes.
Does this include Yards?
Yes, that is included.
Square, Jack Warren Park, the Moser property on Littlewine Road, the Moser property. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. What does this constitute here?
All public properties that we own, in addition to public properties owned by the state at an interchange for which we have agreements for we're taking responsibility for.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to understand exactly what this line item was, because I got a feeling that it shows up in other places that I haven't been able to detect yet.
It does.
Us is only getting paid in 2 departments. Is that correct?
3 departments.
Three.
3 departments. Okay.
Very good. Any other questions for Public Works? Okay, with the caveats that we have discussed, is there a motion to approve the Public Works budget? Mr.
Motion
Smith.
to approve.
What was that?
That was David Smitherman.
Thank you.
I'm waiting for a second, Ms. Walker.
Okay.
Is there a second? I'll make the second. Mr. Smitherman makes a motion. I make the second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to I'd like, before you call the vote, Mayor, I'd like to ask the attorney a question here. Normally, if we were live, I would not say anything on this and it'd go down as a yes vote. I do not support the vehicle. I've already voted against it. What can we do electronically? Do I vote against the whole department budget, or because of one thing I've already voted against, or what?
Well, just as far as any difference between the remote and a regular meeting where everyone's present, since you are here, they wouldn't be treated any differently.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Fail to vote, it will register as a yes vote.
All right.
Very good.
I don't know technically we're approving anything formally. Of course, we vote on a budget, but we're getting the general, basically it's a vote on consensus that we're ready to move forward.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Hey, I'm sorry.
Very good. With that, we'll call the question. Ms. Welch.
Aye.
Ms. Hunt.
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Mr. Franklin. Mr. Smitherman.
Aye.
Dr. Sadler.
Aye.
Mayor votes aye. That is 6 votes yes and 1 we can't abstain. So 7 vote yes.
I guess so. I don't know.
Counts as 7.
7 vote yes. Very good.
That's cool. I'm all right.
I'm clarifying. I'm clarifying again. When you raised your hand, Fred, was that a yay or a nay?
He was just waving high.
I was just waving high.
Oh, okay. So, Bo?
He did not cast a vote, but he is present, and it's treated the same way. We don't have him being gone.
Okay.
So it is treated as a yes vote.
Thank you.
Very good. Next item.
Okay, we move on to streets. You'll find that on page 27. Everybody wants to flip to that? All right, I'm gonna give you a little bit more explanation on the first thing I'm gonna say. When we talk, like earlier we did with Ryan, and we discussed the paving contract, we pay for paving out of 2 different pots of money. We have an allocation of funds from Powell Bill, and that amount of money that Powell Bill gives us is not enough money to be able to accomplish everything that we want to accomplish for paving during a year. So we do supplement the dollars, and that supplement of dollars comes out of the streets department. So this is going to, what you'll see in that first thing I'll point out is that under paving and resurfacing, we have $120. That plus the allocation for paving and resurfacing in Powell Bill, which we will discuss at a later point, will constitute the total dollars that we are investing in paving and resurfacing for the upcoming fiscal year. I'll give you a spoiler alert on it. We are keeping that total funding in the approximate same ballpark as we have for a number of years for paving.
Okay, Hank, you said 120. I think you meant 120,000.
Yes, 120,000.
Okay.
All right, moving forward under contracted services, it was discussed earlier with the pavement conditioning survey or study. We do have that included in this fiscal year street department budget at $18,000. Moving forward, our customary allocation for snow and ice removal at $75,000. And then finally, we do have sustainability projects. This is a reimbursement from waste management, but we still have to allocate it for expenditures within a department line item. That is $4,000. That is money that is paid for the town and reimbursed by waste management. In the past, we've used it for such projects such as the shopping bags, the pickup sticks for litter, and the steel straws that we have for giving away to our folks to, I guess, for lack of a better term, to encourage them to act responsibly in environmental concerns. And that is all that we are pointing out to in the streets department.
Mr. Smitherman.
Hank, per our discussion earlier, could we look at using this $4,000 to go towards that recyclable thing we were talking about last week?
Recyclable. refresh my memory on the recyclable thing.
That thing that Wake County was doing, that one of the citizens asked me if we could.
That would be an eligible, I think that would be in the ballpark if that was something we wanted to look at next year. What Councilman Smitherman is looking at is he and I had a conversation where Wake County was leveraging their buying power to offer compost bins to people that were able to come by and look at it. So to explain my answer, a compost bin, because of its sustainability nature and its connection to environmental, probably would be something that could be approved by Waste Management. But that's just one of many kinds of ideas that are along the same veins.
Thank you, Ms. Foster.
Yep, question, comment. Comment, obviously a plug for looping the sustainability committee into that, number one. No, their new name. Number two, what the pavement condition study, is this something that's done annually? Or how?
No, this is what Ryan was talking about, and I believe Councilman Sadler alluded to as well, that was probably last done
Right.
3
Okay.
years ago. This
Okay.
will be 4th year.
Got it.
Yep.
Ms. Hunt.
I believe Ms. Welch was prior to me, Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Quick question. As we may discuss at another time about possible yard waste pickup that's mentioned so often in our survey for our citizens, would this money be able to be directed towards that?
No, ma'am.
It would not be eligible.
It probably could, but it would probably not be. It would be more effective for the effective of like buying something to promote recycling or sustainability. $4,000 probably would not touch a significant portion of a contract for yard waste.
Okay.
Ms. Hunt.
Hank, this is the paving, this is street paving only. This is not talking about the repaving of the parking lot with the annex or any
No,
of that.
this is just public streets.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franklin.
Yeah, if I'm looking on page 36, where it's talking streets, it's got contracted services, $18,000. Then if we go back to the page we're currently on, with 27, it's got contracted services, $37,000. Where's the other 19,000 going?
I'm sorry.
Well, pavement conditions study is not the only thing in contracted services. It's just what we want to point out as being unusual or different in this year's budget. Both Ms. Arell and Ryan can get to more detail as far as other things in contracted services that would be included.
Well, I'd like to hear that because that's more than what the 18,000 is.
Right.
I'll take it, Hank.
All right.
Also in the contracted services, we have $9,000 budgeted for any repairs, electrician repairs to any of our street lights. And we've also budgeted an additional $10,000 for any tree trimming in the right of ways that might need to be done.
All right. Well, that explains it. I just need to know where it was going.
Any other questions?
Councilman Franklin, the reason we didn't pull that out is those types of numbers are in the budget every year. So
yeah,
trying to just point to what's different.
Any other questions? Very good. We'll have a motion to approve the streets budget.
So second.
Mr. Franklin makes the motion. Ms. Welch makes the second. Roll call of council members. Ms. Welch.
Aye.
Mr. Franklin.
Ah.
Dr. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Smitherman.
Aye.
Seems like I left somebody out.
Aye, Jean Marie.
Jean Marie. Ms. Foster. You disappeared from my screen. Mrs. Foster.
Yes, I'm about to lose my Zoom, so just be aware, okay?
Yeah, I think we're all about ready to lose our Zoom.
Thank you.
So that is unanimous. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 9:30. Do we have another budget meeting scheduled?
Yes, we have one next Monday.
Monday.
Okay. Council, is it your wish to continue on this evening or to continue this next Monday?
Let's call it a night.
Yeah.
Yeah, three and a half hours, pretty good.
Motion.
I agree.
Very good. And it's as the clock on the wall behind me, it is not 2:30.
Can I remind,
Twice a day.
Why are we,
remind
hey, I'll stay here all
everyone
night. Let's get.
let me remind everyone that that at the last meeting, it was voted that you would have your regular meeting at 6 o'clock instead of 7:30. So don't forget that your regular meeting for next Thursday is going to be at 6. I thought I'd remind you tonight. I'll remind you again Monday.
Very good.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Ms. Hunt. Ms. Hunt?
So we have a meeting on Monday
Yes.
that I have to, okay, I'm just clearing.
It'll be a 6 o'clock meeting on Monday.
Great.
And we're going to get
Finish
into
off these
everything.
items.
Thursday.
It should go very quickly for us. With that, we'll entertain a motion to continue this budget meeting until next Monday. Mr. Smitherman appears to make that motion.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Ms. Foster makes a second. And our roll call, Ms. Welch,
Aye.
Mr. Franklin,
Yeah, I guess.
Dr. Sadler,
Bye.
Ms. Hunt,
Aye.
Smitherman,
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Ay, 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 yes.
Very good. Mr. Horn also is a aye. That is unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Those of you who are still watching at home, this is to be continued next Monday night. It does appear that we take a great deal of time and discuss many of these issues. It's important that we do so because we want to be sure that every council member has a satisfactory answer because they are all responsible to you as we move forward in spending your money. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.